Welcome once again to the New Jersey Globe's pre-primary live stream. We're here. It took a few tries, but hopefully this will be it in terms of technical difficulties. We've got a lot to get to tonight. This is our pre-primary live stream. We'll do one after too. But pretty much we're going to be going through gubernatorial primaries that will be held. I guess they're going on right now. Voting's already started. Legislative primaries going up and through the state. This is really sort of our election nerd fest today, with terms of just we'll be talking money, early voting, what we expect to look for. Today we have a talented panel with us. David Wildstein, for one, editor of the New Jersey Globe. We've got Micah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovich Institute of New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Ryan Dubicki, an elections researcher at the Associated Press. And I'll actually be tossing over to Joey Fox, who's going to talk about one of the biggest dynamics of this year's race. Joey.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that anybody who has followed New Jersey politics for the last year knows that whatever else has been going on in all these elections, the thing that really has shaped how they have played out is the county line, and now the lack of it. Anybody who is watching this live stream, I think, does not really need a primer on what the county line was/is. Ballot design system that heavily favors party-backed candidates, gives voters a visual cue on the ballot of who to vote for and who not to vote for. Struck down in court last year at Andy Kim's insistence, and then bill passed the legislature that did away with it permanently. And it is just everything about that saga, I think, is sort of the baseline for where we're at now. We're going to talk about the candidates in a second, and we're going to talk about the way that this race has played out. But we all thought it was important to sort of set this baseline, where in a normal election year, normal for New Jersey, you would be looking at a situation where all of the county parties would have made endorsements, and the ultimate result of the election would have basically just been a slugfest among those counties, right? You're looking at, let's say, Steve Sweeney gets the endorsements in South Jersey, Mikey Sherrill gets the endorsements in North Jersey, Josh Gottheimer gets a couple of endorsements in Bergen and Warren. That's actually what happened. But in a line full year, that would sort of be the only dynamic we'd even really be watching for, because that's how voters would respond to these elections. They would look at the line. On the Republican side, Jack Ciattarelli has almost every line that would make him even more of a favorite than he is in the actual current Republican primary that we have. So the fact that the line is no longer there, the fact that we're dealing with these governor's primaries on more equal ballots, and especially the fact that we're dealing with assembly primaries, of which there are dozens around the state, on equal ballots, where voters, a lot of voters don't necessarily know who their assembly members are, or even if they do, it's not something where they go into the voting booth like, I'm absolutely positive I'm going to vote for Josh Gottheimer. Well, for an assembly member, maybe less so. So I think that the end of the county line is clearly really critical for that. One last thing I'll say on this before I pass it over to Micah to talk about to give us an overview of the candidates is, even though this is technically the first line-free gubernatorial primary, I would not call it the first line-free gubernatorial campaign, because this campaign for the 2025 governor's race basically kicked off on November 3rd, 2021, when Phil Murphy won re-election. New Jersey governor's races are kind of four-year affairs if you're a really serious candidate and you're really trying to lay the groundwork. A lot of candidates were sort of putting in calls to county leaders and making their campaigns kind of work around the old model of the county line. And then in 2024, they had a wrench thrown in that, and they suddenly had to design new types of campaigns that would adjust for the new reality. So I do think that that's going to always be an asterisk on this year, is that for gubernatorial campaigns, and to a lesser extent for assembly campaigns, we came into this year expecting one thing, and then last year we suddenly got something different. And the campaigns that you're seeing as a result are sort of a hybrid between those two different styles of election. And let's say come 2029, we might be looking at a very different style of election, because the entire time the candidates will have known what's coming. This time, somewhere in between. So I think I've chatted enough. I'm going to pass it over to Micah.
Yeah, so I think this is more than a historical footnote, but I just wanted to say that there was one other year in which the governor's race did not have a line, and that was in 1981, and it was by agreement. It was the first year in which gubernatorial financing, public financing, was administered, right? And so, everybody sort of agreed that that would be putting the thumb on the scale too much. They agreed to not have lines in that one race. And it drew a very large number of candidates. It drew the mayor of Jersey City. It drew the mayor of Newark. It drew two of the members of Congress from New Jersey. Sound familiar? Voters had a lot of choices. And I would say that up until this year, it's probably the race in which New Jersey primary voters had the most choices. And we're starting to see this one impact of the line, neighboring Joey's point before I do my task, this one effect of the line so far is that it has the perception among prospective candidates that there's a more level playing field, or a potentially more level playing field. And so it's drawing more candidates to enter the race. It happened last year with the race to succeed the late Congressman Payne. And I think it happened this year with the added effect of the public financing further leveling the field. So, as a result, I think voters have some really great choices. And on the Democratic side, that starts, of course, with Mikey Sherrill. There's something about her background that I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what that. I can't think of what her biographical background is. But she's represented the 11th district in Congress and the House since 2019. You've got Steve Fulop, who's been the mayor of Jersey City since 2013. Prior to that, he was a Marine, had worked on Wall Street, and after 9/11 was convinced that he should serve his country, which of course Mikey Sherrill has as well. Ross Baraka, the mayor of Newark since 2014, former teacher and principal, and also a little piece of trivia for those who don't know, hip hop impresario. And Sean Spiller, the NJEA president and a former high school science teacher, as well as an immigrant from Jamaica. On the Republican side, there is Jack Citarelli, a former Raritan councilman, small business owner, and assemblyman in the 16th legislative district from 2012 to 2018. Bill Spadia, the 101.5 talk show host, not at this moment, who is also a former Marine. Senator John Brownnick, the state senator from the 21st district since 2022. Prior to that, the Assembly Minority Leader from 2003 to 2022. And another little piece of trivia, he was on the faculty at Rider for 4 years in the 1980s while I was a student there. Justin Barbera and Mario Kraniak also running on the Republican side, the Englewood Cliffs mayor. And that's probably all I need to say at the moment, because we're certainly going to be saying a lot. Oh, wait a minute. Did I miss Steve Sweeney? I think I missed Steve Sweeney, didn't I? On the Democratic side, the iron worker, the Senate president for a record 12 years, and the state senator from the legislative district from 2002 to 2022.
So, Micah, just to be clear, I remember what Mikey Sherrill's background is. She was a Humvee driver in the Marines, public defender, and she has no kids. That's what everybody around the state knows about her, and it's what we're saying here.
Did you say a mom? Did you say?
Yeah. No, she has no kids. She's a mom of 0.
Just guys, be careful, because Jackie Burns is about to just like flip out on me right now. So just we're just sort of joking around here, and so we all know Mikey Sherrill.
Her reputation precedes her.
Yeah. And, and I'll tell you, by the way, as long as we're talking about some of these candidates, I saw a tweet today about knows how to defeat a Republican in a general election. We've talked about Gottheimer beat an incumbent member of Congress. Steve Sweeney beat an incumbent senator and an incumbent Gloucester County freeholder. Steve Fulop beat an incumbent mayor in a nonpartisan election. Hugely a tough race. And I give Mikey Sherrill credit, in my view, even though she didn't actually face him on the ballot. She beat Rodney Frelinghuysen, and she did it early, and she basically beat him into submission. Yeah. And he quickly retired and spent the rest of the year hiding under his desk, afraid of Mikey and Siley Avalenda. So, you've got this field here of people that have, on the Democratic side, done pretty well in tough campaigns. And I think that's an important part of the backdrop of this race with no lines is these aren't These aren't a bunch of schlumps that decided it would be, I was the mayor of a small little town in Bergen County, and it would be fun to get into a race at the last minute with no money and no support. These are all of them substantial. Sean Spiller won a tough race for mayor of Montclair and has, wielded considerable power as the president of the largest public employee union in the state. This is what we're seeing here, and I don't think we've seen this since 1981, is really a power packed field of really good candidates. And on the Republican side, same thing. I mean, Chitterelli. Yeah, people talk about Chitterelli having run. This is his third time. But, others have run many times, and Florio won on his third time. Tom Kean had lost 2 primaries for governor and for Congress before he won a gubernatorial election. Bramnick has been steady at winning elections in a district that's become increasingly more favorable to Democrats. And, Bill Spadia has been an activist and a voice, and has been on that campaign trail for the last decade as much as a lot of other people that have been. So I just think that's important to sort of lay out that this is this isn't just a crowded field. This is a field of gravitas. This is a field of really serious candidates.
I think that's why there's still a contest here. I think it's impossible to put so many good candidates away before the election, right? That's why you can have a front runner, you can have a lead, but there is still a path for candidates who are formidable, right? This is really exciting in terms of the quality of the choices that voters have, I think, on both sides.
So, back to you, Zach.
All right, I want to take over for a minute, talk about some of the money factors in this race. I want to start off with the people the candidates who didn't really raise a lot of money, because in some ways that's notable. Starting at the bottom, we've got, unfortunately for him, contractor Justin Barbera. He kind of shocked people when he filed, actually. He showed up on filing day with the required number of signatures, and it was sort of who are you? I didn't realize you were even running. And it's notable that he managed to get on the ballot, but he's not fundraised significantly, and he's not really been a factor in this race. We also have Mario Kranjak, the former Inglewood Cliffs mayor, as Micah mentioned. And there's some belief that he might have been able to fundraise enough to reach the public matching funds / debate threshold. And that was, in order to qualify for that, you had to raise $580,000 by, I believe, mid-March or mid to late March. And Kranjak, in theory, could have self-funded. I don't know what the exact details are there, but at the end of the day, he didn't reach that threshold. And so someone who really tried to take another MAGA part of the lane didn't end up being a factor in terms of fundraising or on the debate stage. And similarly is Sean Spiller, the Democrat on this side. And he didn't hit that $580,000 mark either. He still hasn't at this point. But he's not been lacking in money either. That's for sure. The NJEA, the New Jersey Education Association, is backed him with $40 million so far. And while none of that has been through his campaign account, or $300,000 has been through his campaign account, but that's not from the NJEA. But while none of that $40 million has gone through his campaign account, I guarantee that people who live in New Jersey have seen his mailers or seen the ads. And so then after that, we start getting into the people who did qualify for matching funds, which, for those who don't know, you get $580,000. But after that, every dollar you raise is matched by $2 in public New Jersey elect funds, up to 8.7 million total the candidates are allowed to spend if they agree to get matching funds. So when you get to there, 4 candidates have maxed out. Republican Jack Chitterelli hit the max. Josh Gottheimer, Mikey Sherrill, and Steve Fulop have all hit the cap. They've all received $5.5 million in the matching funds, and essentially hit the 8.7 million cap. Steve Sweeney is really close. He's about 200,000 short of hitting that cap of matching funds. He's raised about he's received about 5.3 million in the matching funds. Ras Baraka, he is hit about 75% of the cap, so he's been raising decent amount of money, but he's still might leave some on the table unless he can close the gap in the last few days, which there's not a lot of time left. And then John Bramnick, he's decent fundraiser even while not making a huge statement in the polls. He's about 59% of the cap in terms of how much ELEC has given him. And Bill Spadia has kind of sputtered out a little bit in terms of fundraising. He's about 50% of the cap. In the last ELEC disbursement, ELEC didn't give him any money, which meant they didn't apply for it or something happened there. But that's sort of the official side of campaign spending. So obviously, on the other side, there's a lot of soft money in this race. For example, the PAC that's supporting Sean Spiller, the $40 million there, but also One Giant Leap, a PAC supporting Mikey Sherrill, has spent millions. Josh Gottheimer himself gave nearly $10 million of congressional campaign money to a super PAC that's supporting him. So kind of going around sort of the official way to do it there. But there's a lot of money in this race. Ad Impact sent a report to me today, and I believe they said $85 million alone have been spent on TV advertising, which they say already makes it the 6th most expensive primary in the history of the United States. And that's not including canvassing money, mailer money, consulting money, so many other aspects of this race. And so that's how it stands there.
I think primary voters could rightly look at the fundraising ability of these potential nominees and draw conclusions about how quickly, as a nominee, they're going to be able to raise the money in the fall, right? I think Phil Murphy wound up raising the full nut maybe 2 weeks before Jack did in 2021, but Jack Ciattarelli was right there. And so that was a pretty close difference. You don't want, obviously candidates have to spend an enormous amount of time getting to that level, and you don't want them doing that when they need to be doing retail politics. So I think that's a quality that voters could properly look at.
One of the things that I find fascinating about this, $100+ million primary, what did you say, 80 million on TV ads, is not only have we not seen that kind of spending, but we haven't seen this kind of ratio of positive to negative ads. You had modest negative, buys by some of the candidates to go after Mikey Sherrill at one point, but we've had, I can't think of another statewide primary where there's been less negative ads than this one. And again, I don't know how that's going to affect the race. I don't know how the decision to stay positive is going to affect it. And I know that what it was came late, and I know that there was a concern that if candidate A does a negative ad against candidate B, they may be taking votes away from candidate A, but they're not necessarily going to the one who ran the negative ads. They might be spending money to drive votes to everybody else, and I know that was one of the concerns about candidates of these candidates is well, I don't want to throw the punch because I'm going to get charged for that punch, and I might not get the benefit for it. So, I think as we look at this primary over the next couple of days, and then likely for years to come, when we talk about this primary, I think it's going to be the failure on the Democratic side, to really go negative. On the Republican side, and we'll talk a lot more about what some of these defining moments were, but but you had a super PAC, Kitchen Table Conservatives, supporting Jack Ciattarelli, run by Larry Weitzner and Carlos Cruz and Kellyanne Conway. And I was about to show my jersey and say Kellyanne Fitzpatrick, because that's what she was when she first started in Jersey politics. But Kellyanne Conway, and they effectively spent a lot of money early preventing Bill Spadea from presenting himself as the MAGA candidate. And that resulted in a Trump endorsement. So, this money thing, it's just not how much they've spent, but how they've spent it.
And I think that point about the Democratic primary being, sort of mostly positive has contributed to it feeling sort of like this slow developing race, even as we see these 6 candidates kind of theoretically duking it out and spending all these millions and stuff like that. I think voters are getting sort of similar messaging from 6 different people and don't entirely know how to react to that. Like if you're seeing 6 different TV ads for the 6 different candidates and they all say, well, I'm going to stand up to Trump and lower property taxes. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what they're all necessarily saying, but I can sort of see why you would end up with a field that still has a decent number of undecideds in pretty much every poll we've seen, despite all this money, and B, that still feels a little bit sort of ill-defined. And I think that the candidate who really exemplifies that is Sean Spiller, because he came out of the gate with so much money being put behind his campaign, and his whole mission clearly, or I guess the super PAC that he's not allowed to coordinate with mission, was to sort of take this guy who was a well-known name in high-level political circles, but certainly not a household name in anywhere but Montclair. Take this guy and just plaster him all over the state and make him sort of the de facto, like, this is the Democrat running for governor. And we'll see what happens on Tuesday. I wouldn't count anything out, but polls definitely show Spiller, not in the lead, and people are not really acting like he is one of the candidates who is most likely to win the nomination. And I think it's in part because the advertising that was put behind him never really got beyond that first point. It was always introducing Sean Spiller to New Jersey and never making the point beyond that of why Sean Spiller versus anyone else. And I think to a greater or lesser extent with all 6 Democratic candidates, you've seen that a little bit in their messaging.
That's a really good point, Joey. I just want to say Sean Spiller was he was the first candidate where I started getting flyers in October of 2024. I was like, Jesus Christ, we don't have the presidential election going on, it's still getting flyers. So in terms of like getting the word out there that he was running for governor, he was definitely the first one. So that's an interesting point. And then also in terms of the positiveness, as we saw in the first debate in February, they weren't really attacking each other compared to the Republicans. It was more we're all in this together, vote for one of us. So yeah, it's an interesting point of the positivity you mentioned.
A wrinkle.
They like each other anymore. I mean, I wouldn't say they necessarily hate each other, but this is not the most sort of buddy field.
But a wrinkle on the positivity too is that while there weren't necessarily attack ads from one candidate against another, a lot of the ads actually still weren't that positive. I mean, the same ad impact I mentioned, or that ad impact report I mentioned earlier, something like 70% of the TV ads run this cycle, they said, have mentioned Donald Trump in some way. Some of that's a result of Jack Ciattarelli and Bill Spadea both just trying to make themselves seem like the Trump-centric candidate. But just ad after ad, especially earlier in the cycle, from Democrats were I guess from that January to now period, was I'm the best candidate to fight Donald Trump. And that sort of, it's positive in terms of they're just promoting Democrats, not tearing down another Democrat, but it definitely had, it might not have been an attack ad against a candidate, but it was definitely still an attack ad.
That's a really good point. Even toward the end, Mikey Sherrill has started talking about Jack Ciattarelli in her ads. And I think that, she is trying to position herself as being seen as the nominee, taking the fight to the general, right? So you're right. These are not necessarily positive ads. They're just not negative on each other.
And I mean, according to an ad that I saw, there was a really swole guy named Josh Gottheimer who got in the boxing ring and fought Donald Trump. So, I mean, that sounds pretty positive to me.
Doing some looking on Google, that has been seen more than 10 million times on Google and YouTube, and is the most watched political ad in New Jersey from the last several years, at least.
Joey watched that 9 million of those times.
Yeah, I had it on in the background since the day it was released. I cannot get enough of it.
It was too messy.
So, I mean, look, if Gottheimer wins, then chalk one up for the use of AI in political campaign commercials, because if that's a significant number that you just said, Zach, and
Right.
I didn't realize how much exposure that's getting, and he's not paying extra for that.
They've been pushing that one hard. Gottheimer was doing an event up in North Jersey in a Hispanic grocery store, actually, and a man unprompted walked up to him and said that he liked that ad. And I don't believe he was paid to say that. I'm 95% sure he was not paid to say that. But he said it, and that was that.
Yeah, I mean, and the Chitterelli people are, they're thrilled with Mikey Sherrill, because that money that she's put behind a message of Jack Chitterelli is just going to boost Donald Trump, has helped Chitterelli's argument that he's, highlighting that Trump endorsement.
It's kind of like for a while, the Democrats didn't want to attack Chitterelli because, I mean, I think it's no real secret that Democrats would prefer to face Bill Spadea over Jack Chitterelli. And so they were kind of playing it a little cagey, and they wanted like as bitter of a primary fight as they could. And, there would be like emails from the Democratic Governors Association and stuff that would highlight just how like acrimonious the Republican primary had been. But then once the Trump endorsement for Chitterelli landed, I think Democrats just kind of decided, oh, not worth it anymore. We're gonna treat Chitterelli like the nominee. He might still not be. This might all be wasted money, but we're gonna treat Chitterelli like he's the nominee and just go at him as hard as possible. If it makes him win the primary by more, what the hell do we care?
It really is funny to see Jack Chitterelli's ad show the picture of him and Trump together, and it looks happy and bright. And then the next ad is Mikey Sherrill's ad showing that same picture, but it's darkened, brooding music is going. It really encapsulates the dynamic of the difference in the parties. But yeah.
And how much both parties are betting on where Trump will be come the fall, right?
Yeah, and we don't know. So I want to go to Ryan to sort of give him a little bit of notice to pull numbers up, because I want to talk about early voting and advanced voting and where we are on that. But we should talk about what is really up until now, probably up until Tuesday night, the defining moment of this campaign, and that in my opinion. And you all may have your own, is Jack Chitterelli, who didn't support Donald Trump in 2016 and didn't support him, wasn't there for him in 2020, and Jack Chitterelli nabbed Donald Trump's endorsement. And I think that's the defining moment of this race. Is everybody was saying, well, what happens if Trump endorses Spadea? And I was one of those in the camp that if Trump had endorsed Spadea, we'd be looking at an entirely different kind of race. But I mean, Joey, you've watched this all along. How did Jack Chitterelli pull this off?
I think that was a real tease for you to say, okay, Ryan, and now we're going to go to you after we talk about this very complicated, in-depth issue. I mean, this is just, I think that if you follow Trump for long enough and the way that he treats Republican politicians, this is both surprising because you sort of think like, oh, Trump rewards loyalty above all else, but also super not surprising. Trump rewards loyalty in the moment more than anything else. He is, in the long arc of history, extremely forgiving. Like, pretty much every Republican politician under the sun has been who is of any prominence has been on the receiving end of a mean Trump tweet or something along those lines at this point, because pretty much every Republican under the sun has had their moment of wavering from being a Trump true believer. And Jack Chitterelli didn't have a waver. He had a full on nope. I mean, there was the 2016 or 2015, maybe it was, op-ed where he called him a charlatan and not fit to lead this country. I mean, both his 2017 and 2021 gubernatorial campaigns were not especially Trumpy, did not really want the president around. And Trump was willing to criticize him for it. I think he said on Spadea's show, he kind of implied like Chitterelli, that guy and I, like, we don't see eye to eye. He doesn't support me. If he had supported me, he would have won. But this goes back to what Trump typically does, which is when a candidate sort of is willing to make amends and is willing to say, like whatever I may have been in the past, whatever our relationship may have been in the past, I'm your guy now, which is what Citarelli 100% has done for the last year. That has been like number one focus of his campaign. Trump is willing to listen. And I think he's also willing to listen when someone tells him, listen, this person has way more money and is ahead in every poll in the primary. He is likely going to be the winner. You should support him. And I think that was clearly the argument that Citarelli and his super PAC made to Trump over Spadia. They had polls showing him laying the lead. They had the money numbers. They could tell Trump, you could back a winner or you could back this other guy. And that was the choice that Trump ultimately felt he had to make. So tremendously clever on the part of Citarelli's campaign, took what could have been a losing hand and turned it into a winning hand. Right. And now the remaining test, assuming he wins the nomination, is whether that was sort of a misplay for the general election, whether it was worth diving this deep into the sort of Trump world if he's going to have to partially dig himself back out if Trump is minus 20 in New Jersey come November.
And Joey, I think your point about Citarelli making the case about electability is especially potent when Trump is involved in New Jersey and New Jersey politics. He knows people here, has lived here, Bedminster, maybe in South Dakota, where he doesn't know as many political operatives and things are different up there. He endorses the equivalent of Spadia because he sees it differently. But New Jersey is sort of Trump's, I don't know, what did you say, third home? Is New York second right now?
New Jersey might come in second over New York at this point, honestly. And
you remember Trump, I mean, this takes me back, to the early 80s, to the 81 race. Trump has, not only does he live part-time in New Jersey, but he has been fascinated by New Jersey politics for 40 something years. Who
hasn't been?
He had, and as they should, right? I mean, everybody should. And I don't, I never understand these people from Louisiana and Illinois and other states who think that they can, and New York City who think that they can dare compete with Jersey. But Trump loves Jersey and he has followed Jersey. And I mean, I remember him getting involved in a, state Senate primary in Atlantic County. I mean, he did business in Jersey. This doesn't surprise me that he really wants it. But
he put his own former personal attorney and counselor to the president in as the acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey.
Yeah. There's two quick things. What I think the evolution of Citarelli from critic to supporter, I think has been very similar to J.D. Vance, who wound up as Trump's pick for vice president, right? And he started as a critic as well, a pretty vehement critic, a pretty vocal public critic. That's the one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing is about the argument you made about electability. That has been, I think, a clever attempt by Spadia to thread the needle. I don't know that it's going to matter, but he's tried to make the argument that Trump is endorsing a poll. He uses that line a lot, right? He's not supporting a candidate. He's supporting a poll. He likes a poll that shows that Citarelli can win. He shows that Citarelli's got the best chance of winning the election. This is not some resounding endorsement of Citarelli personally. This is where he stands in the polls. This is a political decision.
I agree,
right?
Mike. It's easy to endorse the person who's likely going to win.
Right. It's a bandwagon, right? Yeah.
People in New Jersey do it all the time. We get so many emails every day from people endorsing unopposed assembly members. Like, great. We're so glad you're on their team.
Yeah. And by the way, and I'll make this the last comment before we really do go to Ryan, but, something that, not everybody who reads the New Jersey Globe sees our cutting room floor, but one of my, my pet peeves and as the oldest in this group, I don't think I'll live long enough to recite all of my, grievances, but one of them is if you're going to support somebody who's unopposed, don't do it a couple days before the primary as though you spent months since filing day mulling your options and then finally decided. To me these endorsements are a little stupid and we don't run them, which is why people don't see them. But how about if we go to Ryan Dubicki, Associated Press election researcher? He is to to data what Josh Gottheimer is to congressional fundraising. I mean, he is, he is the master of these numbers, and we all wait for his numbers every day to arrive. So Ryan, tell us what's happened so far. And I can't get this, and I'm sorry, and I can't. We are now E minus.
Well, the data is as of last night, so 6, even though it's
okay.
5. Yeah,
right. Okay, so we're talking about E minus 6 numbers on E minus 5.
Yeah, correct. Because the data is always as of like last night. So I'll always compare E minus 6 for tonight, even though tonight is E minus 5. But not to confuse everyone, we're at E minus 6 now. Yeah. So for those who've been following me, advanced voting is quite high. Besides 2020, which is like the biggest asterisk, in New Jersey history, because it was all mail. This is like record-breaking primary vote by mail and in-person early voting turnout. We're currently at 248,308 advanced votes cast, which is mail, which the AP calls advanced, which is vote by mail and early in person, and 91,149 advanced votes for the Republicans, which is obviously exceeding a record. I'm comparing this mostly to a federal primary, which was last year, 2024. That's the second most highest advanced turnout we've had in New Jersey primary history. We're already at 122% of where we are in E minus 6 in 2024 for the Democrats and 146 for the Republicans. Comparing apples to oranges, for tonight, I'll just, cite anything related to 2024 E minus 6 precedent. So way to go with advanced turnout. In terms of like what the projections are looking like, I'll start with the Democrats first. So on 2024 E minus 6, we were for vote by mail ballots, we were at roughly 76% of the eventual mail ballots cast. So if we take the current returns of 221,000 vote by mail ballots and divide that with 76% of mail ballots that have come in, we think 24% are outstanding. That calculates at roughly 290,000 vote by mail ballots that will be officially cast for the Democrats once the dust settles on Monday, E+6, which is the postmark deadline. For in-person early voting, the 2 days that have been going on, there's been roughly, on average over the last 2 days, 13,726 in-person early votes cast with Democrats if you average the 2. Given that we have 4 days left, you take those calculations and we're looking at roughly, I'm estimating 82,000 roughly in-person early votes cast once early voting ends on Sunday. Add those two together, we're looking at roughly 372,000 advance cast with Democrats. Advance expected, quite frankly. And of course, the biggest unknown is how much election day vote will that yield. In theory, if there's more advance cast, there will be less election day votes because people are just switching how they vote. So historically, I mean 2024, 52% of Democrats were cast a vote before election day in advance in 2024. So if I derive 372,000 advance expected for the Democrats, divide that by 52%, that would be 729,000. Now, personally, that might be a little bit high because in 2024, there was only 563,000. And as I said, I think there will be less election day vote in terms of like what percent of the vote was on election day. I think it might be closer to like 60 or 62%. So if we derive 370,000 advance expected to over 62%, we're looking at 601,000, and that would be 107% of 2024's 563,000 ballots cast. It seems much more reasonable. So I guess the range I have for the Democrats would be 600,000 to 729,000. Quite a big range. I think once in-person early voting ends and we get more updates on vote by mail ballots on Monday E-1 and election day, I think those adjustments might change a little. So if it's 600,000, that would be 25% registered Democrats. If we get 729,000, which is like the max in my opinion, that'd be 30% of registered Democrats. So personally, I think 25 to 30% reg is the registration turnout would be my guess for the Democrats. For the Republicans, they've returned their mail ballots sooner. And by sooner, I mean in 2024, we're at 80% of the eventual mail ballots cast for the Republicans. So if we derive that, we're looking at roughly 87,000 vote by mail ballots cast for Republicans. If we think 80% of the official mail votes already in already, which was as of last night E-6. On average, over the last 2 days, 10,795 have been cast statewide per day. If we take the calculations of 4 days left, we're looking at roughly 64,760 early voting expected, would be my opinion. Add vote by mail and early voting together, we're getting 151,000 advance expected for Republicans. And as we all know, it's no secret, Republicans do prefer to vote more on Election Day. And historically in 2024, 27% of the turnout was advanced. So the rest was on Election Day. So Republicans obviously vote more on Election Day. Again, I think because advanced voting is at a record high, I think there'll be less Election Day voting this year. So instead of 20% of the vote being advanced, maybe it will be 37%, I'm guessing. But regardless, if we think the percent of the vote being advanced is 27% Republicans, we're looking at roughly 568,000, which is quite high because that would be 164% of 2024. That would be great. I don't think it's absolutely realistic, just because I think there's just less people voting on Election Day. So if we think the advanced turnout will be 37% of the total turnout, then that lowers to 410,000. So my guess, we're ranging at probably 410,000 to 568,000. 568,000 would be 35% registered Democrats, and 410,000 would be 25% registration. I know it's a big range. I think we'll have much more. We'll have a less range once early voting ends, and we'll get more vote by mail updates. But overall, yeah, advanced turnout is pretty high. I think that obviously the biggest unknown is the Election Day vote. But time will tell if the Election Day vote will be the same as 2024 or less. Obviously, if it's the same, that's just a very high turnout, obviously, like mathematically. But yeah, I think I'm really happy that this primary is compared to a federal primary, because New Jersey, it's no secret that New Jersey has a primary turnout problem. So the fact that I'm comparing this to a presidential primary, it makes me happy. I know obviously last year's presidential primary wasn't the most exciting, but still federal primary, so still somewhat high profile. But yeah, I think overall, if things look good, we're going to exceed 2024, regardless of what percent of the vote is advanced. So way to go, New Jersey voters.
Ryan, did that 410 through 568, was that the Republican side?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's an enormous jump over 2017.
So just quickly, am I remembering it right, Ryan, that the Republicans had obviously a very big early voting presence in the 2024 general, but they didn't really in the 2024 primary, right? Like it was
not the primary, no. In the general, yes. So actually let me pull it up really quick. So for in-person early voting specifically, Republicans are at 489% of what we were in E-6 in 2024. Okay. In 2024, I know we have one extra day of early voting, so it's a little bit of an apples to orange, but on E-6 in 2024, which is the first day of early voting last year, there were only 4,000 early votes cast for Republicans. Now we're at 21,580. See with the Democrats, are at 429% of where we were last year in 2024. So both parties are really embracing in-person early machine voting more than last year, as expected, obviously.
Sorry, Mike, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. What's striking about this, because if you want to go apples to apples, the 2017 primary was the last gubernatorial contested primary, right? At least on the Democratic side, right? Yeah. Open seat. How about that? And that drew 527,000 Democrats, 259,000 Republicans, for a total of 786,000 total vote in that 2017 primary. If Democrats grow to 600,000 or 700,000, that makes sense. That's within the realm from 527. But for Republicans to jump from 259 to 410 or 568, that's an enormous success story. They could potentially double where they were 8 years ago. That's remarkable. And then, of course, the really good news, as you said, Ryan, is we could break 1 million votes in this primary, where the last open seat gubernatorial was 786.
Yeah, I do want to caution, because I'm assuming that 568 would be. I'm assuming 568,000 Republicans would be exactly the same advance rate as it was in 2024, which was 27% of the vote being mail and early voting. Yeah. I think it's really plausible to assume the advance rate will be higher than 27% this year. So if I do 37%, then it would be 410,000. So which is still 118%.
It's still a big jump. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Ryan, it looks to me like on the Republican side, a noticeable, not a huge number, but a noticeable increase in vote by mail. That Republicans are becoming a little bit more accepting of it, and we didn't see this really in the primary last year because there was none, but we saw in the general New Jersey Republicans have completely and totally embraced early voting. Yeah. And look, am I right? Your numbers are showing that they're continuing to like it.
Yeah, I don't think they're loving it. They're on the vote by mail wagon, like as of right now. I say that because yes, vote by mail for Republicans is higher than last year in 2024. Like as of E-6. So on E-6, there were 58,168 vote by mail ballots cast, whereas now it's 69,569. So which is it's an increase. But I also caution because there's just, for both parties, New Jersey has such a low vote by mail return rate, and as you guys know, it aggravates me. So it's hard to say if Republicans are really embracing it, just because there's already such a low return rate compared to the number of requests. Can one say they're embracing it more this year than last year? It's hard to say, just because this is a much more high-profile primary than last year. But they're definitely not rejecting it more than last year, I would say, David. I would say they're either embracing it slightly more or it's the same, quite frankly.
Yeah. And look, I mean, we'll get to this in a few months, but nationally Republicans have changed their rhetoric on vote by mail, and if Republicans are going to win the governorship in the fall, they can't ignore this. And I think you're going to see all the candidates, I think you're going to see all the candidates focusing on it.
I think, I'm more excited to see what the general holds for what percent of the vote by mail return is Republican compared to at least 2024, like what percent they make up.
So Ryan, look through, to talk about these numbers, on a more local level, I caution everybody that just because you have the support of a county organization doesn't mean that all these votes belong to that candidate. But what's it looking like, in Bergen, since that's where Gottheimer needs to come out with a huge margin? How, Essex, the urban side versus the suburban, which is Baraka versus Sherrill, Middlesex, South Jersey. How are those breaking out?
So I think compared to, like, on a county level, as I said, I think advance expected for the Democrats is looking at 372,000, which would be 127% of 2024. On a county level specifically, like Bergen County, like you mentioned, David, that would be 121%, which would be below the statewide average. But I'm looking at counties like, let's see, Atlantic, 150 would be 151%. That would exceed the statewide average. Hudson, no surprise with Brian Sack's early voting machine, that would be 163% of 2024, which is actually the highest county for the Democrats as I'm looking at my table right now. So in that order, be Hudson County with the highest, followed by Atlantic County, and then Morris County. Those are the three counties that would the top three that would exceed the most of 2024. Middlesex would be 123. Middlesex is already pretty high advanced voting county, so I'm not surprised it would exceed so much in 2024, because same with Camden, only 106% in 2024. So Camden and Middlesex counties have really have already embraced advanced voting a lot. So I'm not surprised that it would exceed so much in 2024 compared to the statewide average. But I think Hudson County, I could just catch my eye, Hudson County 160%. While I'm not surprised, it is impressive. Other counties I'm looking at now, Union County would be 139% of official, of 2024 official. Another one would be Essex, 146%. I'm just looking at counties that are exceeding the statewide average. I do caution these are still estimates because early voting hasn't ended yet. And also, there could be less mail ballots returned. Like the average daily mail ballots return could drop, hypothetically. So I do want to caution these are still pretty rough estimates on E-6. But every county across the board is going to, in my opinion, will exceed. Advanced turnout specifically will exceed 2024, which is, promising, in my opinion, because I just didn't think I would be comparing against 2024 a month ago. So I'm happy to be doing that now. So
the thing that's fun for those of us who, we should caution too that this is completely non-predictive to look at the early vote, right? You can't really look. And David, you said just because there's a big South Jersey vote, for example, throughout this period, we've seen that maybe more than a third of the vote by mail ballots have come from South Jersey counties.
Yeah.
Camden voters have returned over half of their ballots. Gloucester is about to go over half of their ballots. And that would seem to suggest a strong turnout for Steve Sweeney. But as you said at the outset of this discussion, we know that there are other candidates who are also doing well in South Jersey. Looking at that AARP poll, and not to over rely on one poll, but looking at that AARP poll, Mikey Sherrill is doing well in South Jersey, particularly among women. We know that there are pockets like Cherry Hill where Josh Gottheimer is getting a South Jersey vote. And so, if Sweeney is banking on South Jersey, he needs 70, 80, 90% of that vote in South Jersey. He may not be getting it just because the highest number of early votes are coming out of South Jersey doesn't mean that they're all Sweeney votes. But one thing that's been fun to watch as you said, Ryan, is the back and forth between Camden and Middlesex, because they really do this right. They turn out their voters. They have their voters in the habit of voting by mail, and it's a real derby every day. At this moment, Camden's got over 32,000 vote by mail ballots returned, and Middlesex has 28,000 Democrats returned. They'll climb. Middlesex starts a little bit later. Camden starts earlier. It's fun to watch for the junkies who these are the only numbers we have at the moment.
And I want to talk about, and I want to get everybody's view on this as we sort of transition into how different candidates win elections. When Jim Florio and Rob Andrews ran for statewide office, Florio in '89, he won 87% of the vote in Camden County. He had 91 in Gloucester and 81 in Atlantic. When Andrews ran for governor against McGreevey in that primary that he lost just narrowly, he came out of Camden with 85%. He came out of Atlantic with 60%. Camden County gave Rob Andrews 80% against Frank Lautenberg, an incumbent in the 2008 Senate primary. I think now what we're looking at is something different, and that is, Sweeney is the South Jersey candidate, but he's not from. He's from Camden County, but he's a Gloucester County guy, and he's never been on the ballot in Camden County before. And I think that's I think it's a good place to start. Is you look at Camden, Democratic stronghold, a lot of votes being cast, but you've got the machine is for Sweeney. You've got go back last year, I think the county clerk primary, Pam Lampett won, I think 80% of the vote against Becky Holloway in the primary. So this progressive renegade faction is about 20% of the vote. It's not a lot in a two-way race in Camden County, but if a lot of them for Steve Fulop, and he's able to get 20% of the vote, something like that, in Camden County in a six-way race, that's significant toward his total haul. Raz Baraka has the endorsement of the mayor of the city of Camden. If Baraka can win Camden, he's getting votes that probably in a normal year with a line would have gone to Sweeney. Mikey Sherrill, the reality is we talk about polling is is I still haven't seen a single poll, and that's public or internal or a PAC or a couple dozen people in a South Bergen town who have reported how they're voting. I've not seen a single poll that doesn't show Mikey Sherrill in first place, and it's hard to ignore that. And you look at a place like Camden County, Sherrill all over New Jersey seems to be, kicking in the doors with suburban women. And then you've got Josh Gottheimer, who is trying to pluck off a strong vote among Jewish voters in Cherry Hill and Voorhees and Haddonfield. And all of a sudden, you're talking about a primary. I think Steve Sweeney will probably win Camden County, but maybe by half of what Florio and Andrews did. And
David, I just
part of that statewide math.
Go ahead, Joey.
I just want to quickly say that the Lampitt Holloway primary was actually significantly closer than you remember. It was 60% Lampitt, 40% Holloway. So even in a primary where you had a renegade Democratic candidate without a kind of
feet closer than I thought. I'm sorry, yeah.
What?
But so Holloway was a couple feet closer than I thought she was.
That doesn't even make sense.
I had to go there. I know.
But so that lends even more credence to your point that in a primary where Democratic voters weren't actually presented with, a ton of super compelling reasons why to not vote for this relatively uncontroversial assemblywoman, 40% of them still did. So, I mean, that strikes me as 60% is an absolute ceiling for somebody like Sweeney in a race like this. And in all likelihood is going to get a significantly lower percentage than that. And I think that I've been sort of thinking about Sweeney and Gottheimer similarly on this particular issue, where Gottheimer is also a candidate with a very, very coherent regional base in Bergen County, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get, an absolute landslide in Bergen County. Yeah. Because again, the candidates have been making serious efforts there where, Fulop has local endorsements. There's a Black community that's interested in Baraka. There's, just all the candidates are spending money in the New York City media market. So of course, all the candidates are just sort of getting their names out there and getting themselves to be sort of part of the conversation in the county. And people are not feeling like they just, I think the dynamic in all of these counties, when we're talking about, who the county party supports versus how the race is going to go, is voters, if they want to, have the tools to make up their own minds on these things. Yeah. They have been getting mailers. They have been seeing ads. If they Google things, they will get an absolute flood of information about the candidates. Some of it AI, but some of it's not. And that will mean that any candidate who wants to, any voter who wants to put it even the littlest bit of effort will be able to make up their mind in a way that could diverge completely from what their county organization tells them to do, or, Josh Gottheimer's my congressman, so I guess I better vote for him for governor. I think that voters have the ability to be way more independent minded than that. And that is sort of troubling for the candidates whose strategies are based around getting a huge amount of votes out of their sort of geographic base. And then, trusting to get at least a little bit of the vote everywhere else to push them over the finish line.
I totally echo you, Joey, because when, I got asked several times for weeks ago when vote by mail ballots were starting to come in, it was obviously dominating South Jersey with the return rate. And I got asked a lot of times if this favored Sweeney. First of all, I hate getting asked editorial questions like that. But second of all, it's also true. You're right, because there's just so much money and resources from all the candidates. It's really hard to say if it benefits one person over the other. Like you said, voters are pretty open-minded and educated, and having they've had a lot of information from a bunch of candidates. It's really hard to say if this benefits one specific person. And South Jersey has always had a higher return rate than North Jersey, so it's really hard to say if it benefits one candidate over the other.
Right.
And what we don't know at this point is demographics of the electorate. We don't know exactly. You know who's voted by town, but we really don't know. If this is we don't know gender, we don't know race, we don't know religion, and all of these are factors. And I sort of look at this wild card in this race is Raz Baraka, and he has come on strong, and I we all we all saw at the February gubernatorial debate. That was Baraka, in my view's breakout moment.
Mm-hmm.
Is he really showed New Jersey, I'm in this to win. Here's what I'm presenting. Here's my message. He showed a lot of passion. But at this point, I think what we're going to have to look at, and we won't know this until next week, is he able to mobilize a turnout machine to turn out black voters that have been relatively, sitting out, not relatively, but they've been sitting out Democratic primaries for the last few years. Turnout in urban areas, in primaries, even in generals, has been lower than where Democrats want it to be. Baraka, if we will talk about 4 of 4s and 3 of 4s, 1 out of 4, the regularity of the voters. I think if Baraka is to win this race, it's going to be on the backs of what will be 1 out of 5. The 0 out of 4s, what'll become 1 out of 5 primary voters. He needs, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think he needs to bring out voters that we haven't seen, probably since, I think it was 1.1 million people in total voted in the Democrats voted in the Obama Clinton 08 primary. He needs to bring out new voters, not necessarily young voters, not new in the sense of age, but he needs to bring back to the Democratic tally voters that have not been showing up. And if he can do it, I think that could be, a bit of a game changer on election night. If he can't, if he doesn't have this poll operation, if people who are for Baraka don't come out and vote for Baraka, then obviously completely different stories.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting, when I gave the eye test to candidates, however valuable an eye test for me is, but if you went through to county conventions early in the cycle, like David mentioned, his performance in the debate, Mayor Baraka's performance in the debate. He has shown skill at cultivating energy, even within establishment Democrats, even not necessarily black establishment Democrats. In Somerset or Hunterdon County, the first convention, he finished second, and then he finished second in something like the next 6 county conventions. And so he maybe that would be different if Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop had participated, but he showed an ability at just building energy among those crowds. And the 3 phrases I've heard most this year are, "I'm a Navy helicopter pilot," "I'll be the lower costs, lower taxes governor," and the third one is, "Oh gosh, I have to speak behind Mayor Baraka. I hate doing this." I've heard it twice or 3 times a week, and I'm sure you've all heard it during the debates. And he's shown an ability to do that in when he has audiences, but so far it's unclear if he'll be able to expand that statewide. It's been interesting.
I think we should talk about the Fulop strategy, which is that he doesn't have to win everywhere. He may not even, in his estimation, think that he needs to win anywhere if different people, different candidates are winning in those spots. So if Gottheimer's winning in his pocket, if Cheryl's winning in her pocket, if Sweeney's winning in his pocket, but nobody's winning by a lot, as we just talked about, right? You've got to get significant traction in your county. It's not enough to just win. You've got to get a significant lift. And his feeling is if he is a strong second in enough places, that could be enough to put him over. Like statewide, on a statewide basis, that could put him over. I'm in Atlantic City right now, and there's a big billboard of him on Route 30 coming into town. You can't avoid it, right? And it's been up all year. He's got the support of the mayor, who, despite his earlier legal troubles, is apparently in really good shape for his own race this year. And so, Phillip's got significant chances, I think, in Atlantic City, and as a result, maybe in LD2. His one of his candidates, Bruce Weeks, apparently is doing really well in Atlantic City, may get significant traction in Atlantic City, and so could win Atlantic City, and so may be bringing a lot of votes Phillip's way as well. So Phillip's strategy obviously is to compete everywhere. He's built this organization from scratch, this post-line environment that he thinks he's planned for that nobody else has. His supporters were at 10 train stations this morning across the region, across North Jersey, and across where trains run. People ride on trains every day. And so, if he's getting votes from his running mates, if he's getting votes from the mayors who have worked with him and who have supported him, that's close to 50 or 60 towns. That could mean a significant number of votes statewide in an electorate that's split up 5 or 6 ways.
And I'll go ahead, Joey. Then I'll go ahead.
Well, just when Zach and I did our story earlier this week about we chose 11 towns as kind of proxies for what we're looking at in the governor's race, I think we mentioned Phillip in 10 out of the 11 towns. I think the one where we didn't mention him was Newark. And sort of that kind of, I realized that when I was writing it, I was like, are we biasing Phillip with these choices? But it's not really. It's sort of like you can write, if you wrote write-ups of all 564 towns in the state and how they might vote in the governor's race, I think you'd probably mention Phillip in 90% of them, because even if he is not likely to win a lot of these towns, you can see how he'd be a force in a lot of these towns, in most of these towns. And there's an idea that I got, and Micah, you brought this up too, basically. There's an idea that I got introduced to a while ago that it's a very election Twitter-y idea, but I've always liked this, the idea of sort of upwards coattails, where we traditionally think about a candidate at the top of the ticket dragging people down below them across the finish line. But there is sort of a logic to the reverse, where if someone like Phillip has, I don't remember exactly how many assembly running mates around the state he has, but it's in the dozens. If he has all these people who, if any of them are good campaigners, they're going out and they're getting votes and they're handing out palm cards that say, vote for Carolyn Rush and Brandon Saffold and Steve Phillip. And are all of these assembly candidates going to beat the establishment choices or the incumbent assembly members that they're running against? Most of them probably won't. Might they get 30%? That seems eminently possible. If most of that 30% also flows to Phillip, that's a great result in a lot of these towns. Whoever gets 30% of the vote on Tuesday, that's probably the winner, just looking at the overall math of this field. Yeah. So I think that it is, I don't know whether it will work necessarily. It could be that these assembly candidates crash and burn. It could also be that there are plenty of voters who are voting for them for a variety of reasons, but then don't actually want to vote for Phillip because it's just they're thinking about each race separately. But you can very much see the logic in it.
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple of points to make, but one, let's do. We like to do, Joey. If you could put all 5 of us up at the same time.
People feel that I am the grid master.
I'm going to do what the candidates, what we do to candidates, and they hate it. Who here thinks that the winner of the primary will break 30% of the vote?
I'm putting my arm over here like Tom when Congress.
Like Tom can't. I don't know. I think it might be just.
I just won't participate. I don't think that it captures the nuance.
I have my own question after this too.
I'm not raising my hand. I'm just going to state that the winner of the primary will be the person wwe'll wins the primary. So we'll leave it. All right. So it failed when we did this, the same as it sort of failed in the debate. So I'm sorry.
I followed all the rules. I raised my hand. I did exactly what you asked me to do.
I will say 30 would be even a good number for the winner. I would say, it's possible. You get asked this question a lot. Certainly numerically possible to do it with 20 or 25% of the vote to win the nomination.
I would say, jokingly, if someone gets under 30%, then the legislature should pass emergency legislation and have a runoff with the top 2 candidates a few weeks later.
Well,
choice voting.
Yeah. That's how it was in 81. I mean, you had Kane at 30. I think Florio won in the high 20s. I mean, you have that when you have really good candidates in the race and a lot of them, then it's hard to divide it. I want to make a couple points though. One is, first of all, as I caution everybody to, take what they see on social media, mildly, and candidates who take lots of pictures of people, working a train station doesn't mean that they're the only ones doing it. It means they're doing a good job posting photos. I heard this afternoon, Mikey Sherrill's had 2,000 volunteers in her universe. You don't see the 2,000 faces, but I think there's a couple items here that might make a difference. One is which candidates have given voters a reason to vote for them. I think you can make an argument that Steve Fulop has presented himself to a segment of the population really well and has had the opportunity to energize them. I think you can say that, Baraka the same, Gottheimer counting on this affordability thing, Sweeney, counting on some of the building trades. But Fulop has undeniably built a grassroots organization from the bottom up. And I remember on Christmas Day, waiting for my Chinese food to arrive, I went down a rabbit hole, and I'm thinking about, wow, Fulop he puts all these pictures up on social media of all these people on Zoom calls being trained to be volunteers in his campaign. All these, page after page, so hundreds of people listening to him present his plans on housing or any number of issues. And I said, is he gaslighting us? Is he just is he using the same photo over and over? So I started going through his tweets, pulling the photo, copying them, putting them all into the same document. And the reality is they were all different people, and not AI. I mean, these were real people. So I think a big question for Fulop is going to be, are these people that are involved in his campaign, are they able to deliver? Are they actually working and doing their job? And look, some of the people on the Fulop campaign, these are, in some cases, the land of misfit toys, the people in different counties that the organization just didn't want, and they've all found this home. I think the question is going to be, how much they're able to actually work, and whether they're bringing people to the polls. And if Fulop's organization is delivers the effort that it's been designed to, I think you're looking at a different outcome than if people are just showing up at events, taking selfies with them, but not actually canvassing and going, doing all the stuff that they need to do. His fundraising's been strong. Cheryl's, Gottheimer's, all of them, Sweeney. But we don't have any way of telling at this point. We will in a couple days, but we don't have any way of really telling whether this group that he's built is going to work.
Right. And several candidates have said throughout the process that, I'm running a different type of campaign. But the thing is, Fulop really is running a different type of campaign. He's got 35 running mates to show for it across Assembly, and then more on county and municipal levels. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. He's made it a selling point of his campaign, interestingly enough. When he talks about not just policy, when he says, like, I'm physically, you can see that I'm doing this differently, and you can see that I'm enacting change and I'm angering the people in power. And it even gets to the point where if he does win, he's facing questions of how are you going to govern with the people who you are making angry, and who you are, even if they're in the same party with you. Not all of the establishment Democrats love you right now. And so it's when it comes to like running a different campaign, I think objectively you can say Fulop is doing that. I'm a big believer in signs of life, right? He's filling living rooms across the state, right? I'm not going to, this is not a true believer. He's showing signs of life. The organization is performing.
And again, if Becky Holloway is getting, if she can get 40% of the vote, if his running mate in Gloucester City can get 40% of the vote, if he can do that in his districts, he's got a really good shot of winning because the person who wins Camden County may not be the person who wins in 20 other counties.
Yeah, I mean, look, this assembly slate that he's got, he's going to have some wins, here and there. He's already got a bunch of people that by process of elimination, they're going to be nominees, whether Fulop's on the ballot or not, because nobody else filed in these districts. But this is this is the year of the John Lynch line, which is here's nothing, guard it with your life. Getting one of his candidates to be the Democratic nominee in the 24th district, it really doesn't matter. But the reality is this: you've got people who are invested in his campaign. And if each of these assembly candidates can bring Fulop, 1,000 votes, at the end of the day, that adds up to be a tremendous amount. And, he took a bold step in picking a lieutenant governor candidate early. He said he would, and he did, and nobody else even considered it. And Sheena Collum, the mayor of South Orange, what he's got in her is an extra surrogate. And she's got her own schedule, and she's running up and down the state. And she too is in living rooms and in meetings and campaigning. And if the effect of Sheena Collum, forget what she brings in her own base of South Orange and Maplewood, but she's out there campaigning for him. She's working hard, and that may bring votes too that another candidate may not have. So, what he's looking at here is if he's going to win, it's because the universe aligns for him. And if Baraka wins again, be repetitive, it's because he's created, an interest in voters that have been disaffected. If Gottheimer wins, it shows that the affordability message, really is important even in a primary, and that, and that the money counts, and that we don't know what the effect of turnout is going to be on Jewish voters, which are a clear part of the Democratic Party base, and if he's going to overperform there in a field of 6 candidates, that I think is significant also. And then you've got Cheryl, who we're sitting here, me especially, I'm talking about ways that everybody else wins, but it's not like she's sitting back doing nothing, not running a campaign, not out there meeting voters, not connecting with people, and the last point I'll make, and then I'll follow Joey's. Joey wants me to be briefer in the future. She held back a lot of her money. A lot of candidates spent early. Spiller spent early. The Fulop campaign is really from the campaign side, they're sort of out of money. They're now riding on the super PAC money. He needed to invest early.
That's been for a few weeks at least. Yeah. Whereas Cheryl, she held back, and a lot of people criticized. A lot of people said, "Where's Mikey? Where's her TV ads? What's taking her so long?" People got really antsy. And now, as you're looking to close at a time when people are starting to pay more attention and make their decisions, she's sort of leading the pack on, with Gottheimer on the airwaves. So all of these things matter.
So David, just quickly in my defense, in terms of the putting you in and putting you out, you have a speech pattern that oftentimes lends me to think that you are about to conclude your remarks, and then you in fact do not, and keep on speaking for another 4 minutes. So I'm a brave soldier trying my best. The one thing I want to say about, just since we were talking for so long.
By the way, I feel like I'm at 970 Broad Street being attacked all over again, but that's okay.
Okay.
There's an Austin Powers bit about that, right? Everybody thinks he's done, and then he keeps going, right? They're an old.
So, David, you are Austin Powers. It's a great comparison. So just since we were talking for so long, and I feel like I think we may have even talked about this when we did our filing day live stream as well, about sort of the Steve Fulop running mate strategy and how it gives him these sort of and the way that he's been campaigning aggressively, and he's got these tentacles across the state. I do feel like we have to mention, you know, who else has an extremely broad set of running mates who are able to advocate for her candidacy around the state is Mikey Sherrill. We don't really think about sort of the organization quite the same way, because it's so obvious that, like, well, of course, you know, the organization candidate is allied with the rest of the ticket, but that matters in the same way that Fulop having these assembly candidates matter. Like, Mikey Sherrill is from Montclair, but having Teresa Ruiz in Newark and having Brian Stack in Union City and having Dan Benson in Mercer County and having all these people on her side in these places that she's never represented before. I mean, that's clearly meaningful beyond, you know, what the demise of the county line means, and do these county party endorsements matter all that much anymore? You could go either way, but when you've got these local organizations with trusted and oftentimes unopposed assembly members and county commissioners and mayors handing out literature and door knocking and saying, here's, you know, like Slate C, you got Mikey Sherrill at the top, and then, or it's not Slate C anymore. It's like, you got to do like, okay, like here's like 1C and 2B and 3A and 4A, whatever. But you've got all this literature and these campaigns and everything like that working for themselves, but, you know, by extension for you. So that, I think, is a key part of the Sherrill campaign that shouldn't necessarily be overlooked in the same way that it's a key part of the Fulop campaign. They're just coming at it kind of from the opposite side of the organization.
Yeah, I think you're right. We should not lose track. I'm glad you made that point, because the significance of her win, and, you know, not to take away from her bio, which is resonating, not to take away from the fact that she is the only woman in the field, which is resonating, but it also means that the organizations, the county organizations, still, without the line, are the best. They know how to best win in their sphere, in their region. They are the ones who are still the ones who know how to win elections.
So I have one quick question. I actually got, on my work team, I'm actually the only New Jerseyan on my work team. Everyone else lives in Manhattan or Brooklyn. And I got asked this by my one colleague a few weeks ago, who probably saw the poll by Patrick Murray back in late April, early May. I told her I don't know, because it was too early at the time. But my question is, do Fulop and Baraka, do they split the quote anti-establishment vote, and that would benefit Sherrill? Do any of you guys think that?
Well, you know, I gotta point something out on that one, and that is the poll that was done by Patrick Murray. You know, let's not attach Patrick's name to it. That poll was paid for personally by John Graham, a Democratic National Committeeman who serves on Mikey Sherrill's fundraising committee, and he is an owner of Insider New Jersey, another website, and they called it the Insider poll, but that was not a formal head-to-head, and I don't think it's my opinion, not appropriate to recognize that as part of the averages on what we're looking at in a poll. You can't have somebody who's part of a campaign commission a poll that suddenly shows great numbers. It just, you know, I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, I said it's just one poll. Obviously,
yeah, I know.
To the substance of your question, my thinking about this is, I think that there are a certain type of voter who might be looking at the race that way, just sort of someone who is generally a committed sort of ideological progressive, who is kind of approaching the ballot from who is the most progressive. If I can't vote for that person, who is the second most progressive? I mean, I think part of the way to look at this is imagine this is a ranked choice election. How do things sort of play out differently? Where do people who vote number one for one candidate, where do their number two votes flow? But I sort of think about the like prototypical Fulop and Baraka voter for each of them. And for a lot of those voters, I can see Sherrill making more sense as the second choice rather than each other, where, you know, a Black voter in Newark might be extraordinarily loyal to Ras Baraka, and I think that he's going to get a huge amount of the vote among, you know, Black urbanites and suburbanites in Essex County. But the county organization there is backing Mikey Sherrill. You know, they've got people specifically out there, you know, they've got their like local mayors in some cases actively campaigning for her and stuff. A lot of those voters would probably not see anything in particular in Fulop because they're not voting for Baraka for progressive related reasons, but would instead see a lot in Sherrill. And then I think about, you know, sort of the prototypical Fulop voter in some place like Westfield, who really likes his, you know, good government message, who has really been appealed to by his sort of like grassroots, suburban and progressive oriented campaign. Some of those people might think Baraka is the next best option for that type of, you know, for their what they're looking for in a candidate. But some of them are going to be, you know, suburban women or suburban men who are exactly Mikey Sherrill's like base in the 11th congressional district. This is a type of Democratic voter that absolutely adores her in her home territory. And who's to say that if they weren't able to vote for Fulop, they wouldn't think, well, you know, we've always liked Sherrill. We think it's great that, you know, she was in the Navy and she's a mom like me, and et cetera, et cetera. And they look at the mayor of Newark and they think that's not really what I'm in here for. So I think that in some ways, both Baraka and Fulop benefit from the degree of splits in the field because they each have slightly more sort of factional bases. Whereas, and I don't necessarily see sort of Sherrill benefiting a great deal from the splintered field, because I do think that in some ways she is the most broadly acceptable candidate. And a lot of voters, if they were robbed of their first choice, would sort of flow without a ton of protest to her.
I think there's another ideological lane that maybe, and I'll try this out with you guys to see what you think. Part of what we're saying here, I think, is that with so many candidates who are staking out ground as progressives, it's hard to know where they might go or what other factors might take over ideology. But I think the moderate to conservative lane that Gottheimer and Sweeney share could be clearer for either one of them if they both weren't in the race.
But I think to the same extent, you know, like a Sweeney voter in South Jersey might not necessarily be voting for Sweeney for ideological reasons. They might be voting for him for regional reasons. Yeah. And that voter would be very much up for grabs among the remaining 5 candidates if Sweeney wasn't in the race. So,
and that goes back to a point that you made earlier, Joey, which is that if we had gotten beyond resume, if we had gotten beyond biography, if we had gotten really into some of the ideological ideas, then maybe you could say that voters would understand that Sweeney is a conservative Democrat, or, you know, maybe he calls himself a moderate, but that there is some of that with Gottheimer as well. We don't even know if a South Jersey voter realizes that there's another person in the race with similar views.
So why don't we do this? Let's take we're not finished talking about the governor's race. There's some things I want to talk about with the Republicans, but you know, why don't we talk about some of the assembly primaries that we're watching? Zach, where do you want to start?
I think really the only place to start is Hudson County, where we've got those 3 really, really competitive primaries for the Democrats in those assembly races. We can start on the 31st, I guess, where Jerry Walker and William Sampson, Jerry Walker are seeking the seat, and they're backed by a Hudson County Democratic organization. There's also a full-up slate, which features Assemblywoman Barbara McCann's Tomato and a Bayonne Councilwoman, Jackie Weimer. It's part of this Hudson County war that's going on, where there are several different factions involving Steve Fulop, especially, and the Hudson County Democratic Organization, especially, with Craig Guy, Brian Stack, etc. And it has gubernatorial implications for sure in terms of whether the Hudson County machine can pull off a good number of votes from Fulop and co. But really, it's just in this post-line universe, Hudson County assembly races are probably going to be the biggest test of how much power exactly machines and strong county parties can hold without the line. And yeah, I don't know if the stat got mentioned earlier, but they were still showing a decent ability to turn out voters. And early voting Democrats, something like 13% of that early voting in person belongs to LD33, which features most prominently Union City. And Union City Mayor Brian Stack is just turning people out like he always does. And so when all is said and done, I think Hudson is going to be where we see potentially either the signs for what comes next. Yeah.
We talked a little while ago about voting up, right? The influence of lower ballot races, right? Maybe the hottest race in an all politics is local kind of a situation in Hudson County this year is or one of the hottest anyway, is the one for sheriff, right? And Frank Scolari is running for re-election, but he is running with he was running on the Democrats for Change slate with Fulop. He is being challenged by Jimmy Davis, the mayor of Bayonne, right? And so you're going to get a big turnout in this district because Bayonne is part of this legislative district. He's got the support. Jimmy Davis has the support of the FOP within the Hudson County Sheriff's Office, the superior officers. And so this is in many ways, this is a race that's going to drive turnout and it's going to drive interest on the part of voters for all the other races that are going on this year, including governor.
And by the way, just quickly, this is chalk one up for the branding. Only in Hudson County could a 5-term incumbent, product of a political machine who wasn't even aware of his own mailings going out, be running as the Democrats for Change candidate. Absolutely incredible. I mean, look, this district has, it's 2 incumbents and they're split. Jerry Walker, and this is this Joey? Correct me if I'm wrong. I may not be, but is this Jerry Walker's 3rd consecutive cycle? He ran for county commissioner in 23, Congress in 24. Now he's running for the assembly. So for a Hudson guy, he's had a lot of exposure out there.
I think unlike most of the other commissioners in 2023, he
didn't have an opponent,
a primary opponent. So it wasn't like he had to necessarily be out, knocking doors and everything.
Yeah, but what I'm told is that Walker's probably the strongest, of this group, and this is now, potentially a race between 2 incumbents for a 2nd seat, and you got the Fulop people engaged, you've got the organization really engaged, and I wouldn't count out Barbara McCann Stamato, who has been around politics for years and years and years. She's the Jersey City Democratic Municipal Chair. She's the one who's helped other people win Jersey City, and I think that's going to be a really interesting race. And as we go back, it's what Zach said. All of these primaries are going to boost turnout in Hudson County. Jim, it's not just that Jimmy Davis is on the ballot and that might help the assembly candidates. Jimmy Davis is on the ballot and he's for Mikey Sherrill. And now, if he's going to push for extra votes in Bayonne, then this, we're talking about a circular motion everywhere.
I think I've said this before about the 32nd district. I just hosted I was just moderating a debate in that district a couple nights ago. It's my favorite. This is one to the north of the one we were just talking about, the 31st. So the 32nd is Hoboken in downtown Jersey City. It's my favorite assembly race in the state simply because it is the one assembly race that sort of obeys a logic. Actually, one of 2. I think that you could argue, or maybe one of 3. You could argue that the 35th Democratic and the 39th Republican primaries also kind of work like this. But it's really the one true assembly race in the state that sort of obeys a logic that goes beyond the usual sort of New Jersey. Usually in New Jersey, either you just have the party slate win easily, or the party slate going up against a different slate that is associated with some different faction of the party, and then that's sort of the battle. And this is a district where you have that to some extent. You have the Hudson County Democratic Organization going up against the Fulop slate, but you also have a third slate that is unaffiliated with any candidates, Ravi Bala and Katie Brennan. And I'll note that, even sort of the Fulop and the Hudson County slate are, it's a little bit of a different dynamic than usual. I mean, the Fulop slate is an incumbent assemblywoman. So the Hudson Democratic Organization, after supporting Jessica Ramirez in 2023, is immediately saying, never mind, because she's with Fulop. And it's a Jersey City councilman. And then the Yusuf Saleh, and then the Hudson County slate, Jenny Poo and Krista Fonseca, are two sort of political newcomers who are each, well known in their little niches of the community. I'm rambling on this. I'm just mentioning a bunch of candidates' names at this point, but Oh, Zach, yeah?
I'm going to add on to that and say that third slate with Ravi Bala and Katie Brennan is also unconventional in a way, because they're kind of not a slate and didn't plan to be a slate. They're bracketed together on the ballot, and they're sort of running as running mates, but they're running separate ads. Their
separate,
campaigns
campaign comms people that we get emails from.
Right. And so they're sort of running together, sort of not. It's hard to tell, but it adds that dynamic. Sorry to interrupt.
Anyway, I think it's just generally healthy to see a campaign, even if it's only one kind of this year, but at least a campaign spring up in New Jersey that feels like it's more about a couple of people who want to run for the assembly and feel like they have the best ideas of anyone in the race, and are just doing so, and aren't doing so as sort of these pawns of broader forces. And, lots of assembly members have their own sort of political bases, and they've got their own political willpower. But the fact that they're always associated with gubernatorial candidates or congressional candidates or what have you, and the fact that in the county line era, they were literally placed below them on the ballot, just made New Jersey primaries feel like, either they were uncontested or they were just you kind of weighing in on two sides of a war that's happening in echelons of politics that most voters would not really understand. So I'm glad to see a primary that's breaking out of that binary a little bit.
And with that dynamic in play too, I don't think it's surprising that, I don't know about you guys at least, but we've heard anecdotally of ticket splitting in the district. And it's very, very possible. I know it happens occasionally that people from different states get elected together, but it seems like a very high likelihood that could happen in the 32nd.
Because I think in both the 31st and the 32nd, there are cross-cutting reasons for people to support different candidates. I mean, and let's say taking the 31st district, if you are I want Bayonne to be, if you're a Bayonne voter who just likes your local Bayonne politicians, then you would vote for Sampson and Weimer. Or I don't know if it's Weimer or Weimer. But they are on two opposite slates.
And Jimmy Davis.
Right, and Jimmy Davis. That's your Bayonne ticket right there. If you're a Black voter who wants more Black representation in the legislature, you've got Walker and Sampson. That's the Hudson County Democratic Organization ticket. If you're a Jersey City voter, you might go Walker Stamato. And in the 32nd district, you've got these same kind of you can see how voters would arrive at a lot of different conclusions depending on what they're looking for out of the candidates. And a lot of those conclusions don't obey the lines that we on a macro level are looking at.
Yeah, those six candidates in 32, the six candidates who are running, all well-spoken, all thoughtful, all have put a tremendous amount of thought into the proposals. The voters would do very well with any of those candidates being the nominee and potentially the assembly members. And voters don't typically have that many good choices for the assembly race. This is novel. This may be one of the new consequences of the line going away, is that more candidates who may just decide to jump in these races.
And Ryan, this is your district, right?
This is my assembly district. So, and I've been getting flyers from all three slates every single day for a month now. But my point is I really don't know who is winning or is going to win, just because I feel like all three slates have equally advertised themselves so much. I truly think this is all three slates have really campaigned hard in a good way. And there's really no clear front runner, in my opinion, with this race.
Joey, is this the most compact legislative district in the state?
I think so. Yeah.
Just in terms of total number of voters in a small geographic area?
Yeah, I think it's this one, and then probably the next one would either be 28 or 29, the two Newark districts. But yeah, it's really dense. I mean, this is sort of This is New York City's 6th borough right here in a legislative district.
Yeah. So one of the things that strikes me about these Hudson races, and what you just said is absolutely correct. 6 candidates, all in the mix, is exactly what the progressives who filed the Conforti case, Andy Kim, Judge Qureshi. This is what they imagined, and I think this might be for a lot of people, the ghost of Christmas future, that you're going to see this as sort of the start of people who want to run for the legislature just run. I mean, you look at some of these candidates. If they didn't have the line, they wouldn't have got anywhere, and they wouldn't even be in this mix. And we look at the history here. Not too long ago, the 31st district, these were essentially appointed positions. The mayor of Bayonne picked a state assembly candidate. And you had Nicholas Chiarvalotti, who had been the Davis candidate. He got the seat because Davis beat Mark Smith, and so Mark Smith's assemblyman got removed, and Davis decided to take out Nicholas and put Sampson in, and all the others said, okay, this is his piece of the pie. He's entitled to pick this seat. Steve Fulop picked Angela McKnight for the Senate. And he picked Barbara McCann Stamato for the assembly. In the 32nd, which used to be part of the 33rd, but the deal was the mayor of Hoboken got an assembly seat. I think you're seeing in Hudson County the end of an appointed legislature. That was named by this sort of ruling council of elders known as mayors, but I don't think that necessarily exists as much in the 33rd. And this is another part of the Hudson War, and this is Brian Stack against Nick Sacco, and Stack has 2 candidates and Sacco has 2 candidates, and I spoke to somebody in Hudson today because I was trying to track a voter intimidation issue, and found out that Stack has done like 40 mailers, something like that. I'm probably going to get a text from him in 2 minutes saying no, it was 43, and please don't give out bad information. But I mean, and they are on the ground, and they're out there, and they're taking it seriously. And and Stack's one of these guys who believes that you want to be the front car in a 1-lane road. Doesn't want to let anybody pass him. But what you've got here, and I think the math is really interesting in this district. You've got Stack running this race, and he's really the stand-in. All of these mailings, the billboards, the ads, it's all, Brian P. Stack endorses. And it is the transference of a very popular local official in Union City to 2 other candidates. You have Gabe Rodriguez, freshman assemblyman, former mayor of West New York, and you have Larry Weinstein, who don't be confused. If you're living outside of Hudson, don't be confused. Weinstein is a Hispanic candidate, and putting some of his own money into this race too. The interesting thing about Larry Weinstein is he's run against Nick Sacco for mayor 3 times. Mm-hmm. And he, it depends how you define well, but he's gotten in the mid to high 30s. And that's not enough to win in North Bergen. But if that pocket of people that in North Bergen that are against Sacco are going to stick with them in the assembly race, and you're talking about Stack getting, delivering 80-90% of the vote in Union City, and 65-75% of the vote in West New York, and then if there's a third of the vote in North Bergen, I don't know that the math works out very well for that opposing slate.
I would say at least for LD33, which is Union City Bryan Stack, it's the in-person early votes with them is already about to exceed 2024 official. Currently there's let me see, 3,764 Dem in-person early votes in LD33, and there's been roughly 1,800 average votes cast daily over the past 2 days. With 4 days left, we're looking at roughly 11,200, and there officially in last year in 24, where there was only 3,800 early votes cast. So that's a 294% increase from last year. So the early vote machine by Stack is certainly playing off as data wise.
Yeah,
that's notable because unlike a lot of the rest of the state, this was like a very heavily contested primary. This part of the state, this was the Menendez versus Bala primary. So this is something it's not like you're comparing it to like, oh, well, this is sleepy presidential primary. No one really cared at the time. Yeah. Like Bryan Stack and that whole crew were very engaged at this time last year too.
Yeah,
is to in-person early voting what Camden is to vote by mail voting.
Right.
Yeah. And Stack's got, oh God, I knew this number this morning. 6 or 7 early voting locations in Union City.
Right.
I mean, just absolutely incredible. And
way more, David. There's like 20.
Is it 9?
I think there's I saw like 20 mobile voting units on my sample ballot or something. I could go back. I can go check really quick if you need me to.
They're right on the street, aren't they? Aren't they right on the
yeah. And if Bryan Stack has his way, every apartment building in Union City will have its own early voting polling location. And this guy doesn't want to just win. He wants to crush the opposition. He is the opposite of, remember the old story about Joe Kennedy? He's paying, he tells Bobby when he was running Jack Kennedy's campaign for president, win it, but I'm not paying. I'll be damned if I'm going to pay for a landslide. Stack wants a landslide.
And his reason is very sound. And the Baraka people get mad when we say this, but it is the exact opposite of what you see with the turnout problems in places like Newark, right? Stack believes you have to keep voters in the habit of voting year in and year out, and you build a habit. And that's what they do in Camden as well with the voting by mail. Yeah. That is the problem, as you talk about, David, whether or not Baraka can build a turnout operation. You kind of needed to do that before now to start it from scratch. You kind of need to see signs of life. You needed to see past elections where that was fired up, right? You see that kind of behavior of voting, that habit of voting in Union City with Stack.
Yeah. And look, I want to, state the obvious too, and then we can move on to, wherever Zach Blackburn wants us to move on to next. But Bryan Stack has endured a lot over the last year. He's got this group out there that is, these paid agitators, trying to get under his skin, trying to mess with his life, taunting his family. There are, just recently signs now that those people have a connection to Nick Sacco. This race is not about just having an extra vote in the assembly. This race to Bryan Stack has become deeply personal, and all of us that have been around campaigns, over the years, when it becomes personal, it adds an entirely different factor to this race, and we'll see what happens there. But Hudson is. From the assembly level, that's the place to go. And by the way, the good news is because it's compact and most likely we'll have an early count. And I also look at the governor's race there. If we remember, Josh Gottheimer was originally, everybody thought Fulop was going to have Jersey, Hudson County. And Anthony Vanieri was the chairman, and he endorsed them, and it looked like they were all going to go that way. And then Stack and Ceres and and Richie Turner and Jimmy Davis came out and said if Josh Gottheimer runs, we're going to be with him. And then that fell through, the grasp of Gottheimer, and that group, with the exception of Richie Turner, that group has shifted to Cheryl. So all of these votes, they're also out there. All this literature says vote for Mikey Sherrill too. And if Gottheimer comes close, if he wins, it doesn't matter. If he comes close and it's a narrow race and he loses by a small fraction in second place, he can look back to, what happened in Hudson County and how that coalition, fell away from him.
And we, that's the other thing is that, you talk about counties that could wind up as a wash. You could see a situation, and I'm not saying we're not making predictions here, but you could definitely see a situation where Fulop has his strong pockets of support, particularly in Jersey City, right? And among his tickets, his running mates in the rest of the county. You could see a situation where Cheryl has her very strong support from STAC and from the organization. You could see a situation where Gottheimer has strong support as well. You could see a situation where Hudson winds up not with a formidable lead coming out of there globally, right? You can see a situation where they all do well and nobody has a significant lift over the other coming out of the county.
And we'll find out really quick because Hudson reports results very quick. Like they were, I believe, second to report in 2024 GE. So expect votes at like 803 in Hudson County. So
yeah. Can I just quickly, just another one of these pet peeves? There's always a handful of districts in Jersey City where the poll workers, and they work hard and they are the front line of elections, and they get there at like 5 o'clock in the morning, but there's always a couple districts in Hudson where the board workers close up the machines and leave the sticks in and don't remember to turn them in to be counted. And it happens every year. So, maybe one thing that, Junior Maldonado and everybody can just do is sort of remind everybody that, it's not enough to, for the polls to close. You have to send that cartridge in also and count those votes. And this is inane. And so this will be the last thing I say on Hudson. But once those cartridges get locked inside the machine, they have to go before a judge and get a judge's court order to open the machine in the presence of a Democrat and a Republican. And it's a big hassle. So it'd be easier if they just remember up front.
Essex does that too. But yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Zach, tell us where we're going.
So
Not
I guess I'm
Livingston,
the chauffeur. I guess I'm the chauffeur between these assembly districts.
Yeah.
I know we're going to save the best for last, so sorry to Al Barless in the 40th district, but
Always.
let's still keep it.
It'll be a
Bergen
happy ending for it. It'll be okay. So, yeah.
Let's switch counties. Let's switch parties too. I want to talk about the 39th Republican primary, which I moderated a debate for a couple of nights ago, right after Joey's debate. You can kind of say it was a debate. Only one guy showed up, Frank Pallotta, who is the challenger. Like we said, the debate, we're not going to cast judgment on those who didn't show up because it was organized very, very late. And so we understand that schedules exist and we made ours very late. But still, regardless, Frank Pallotta was the only one who showed up. But
it was a great conversation. Great discussion with him for a half an hour. Yeah.
It was. Thank you for being there too, Micah. But he is challenging a pair of incumbents. It's Robert Off, Bob Off, and John Azaridi. He's particularly targeted Off, and Pallotta is particularly targeted Off. Pallotta has run for Congress a couple of times. He lost against Josh Gottheimer a couple of times. So there's a chance that he could have that name recognition among voters in the district. He's not fundraised as proficiently as Off and Azaridi have so far. But it's really one of the main Republican primaries for the assembly. I can't think of another major Republican primary that quite stands up to that one.
This is another one where there's been just a ton of mail. Like you said, like every other day, there, Republicans are getting a mailer from Often Azariti. I think what Pallotta's claim to fame is that in twice now he has run off the line in Bergen and beaten the line.
You're muted, Micah.
Oh shoot.
Okay, that was my bad. I was trying to make him the featured thing, and I misclicked.
Okay, all right.
So Joey muted Micah. Wow.
so while there was still a line, Frank Pallotta's claim to fame was that he beat the Bergen County organization twice off the line, and that is significant. That indicates that he knows how to win in the county. So Often Azariti are not taking anything for granted. They are. You talk about the amount that they've raised, Zach. They're sending out mailers like left and right every other day. It's like the Spiller volume of mail in that district for Republicans.
There's been a little bit of controversy over it, and the main pieces of news that I've seen out of the 39th have been disputes, disagreements, controversies over whether endorsements listed in mailers truly happened. I know that the mayor of Mahwah, I think the mayor of Old Tappan, I might be wrong there, but there have been disavowals and angry statements and apologies and clarifications. So it's kind of been a mess, but you expect nothing more from Jersey.
Pallotta started the discussion the other night that we had with him, the debate, by saying that the 39th is changing, and he sees the Republican margins eroding in the districts more slowly than they have in the rest of Bergen County, but eroding. And he says that the incumbent legislators have not kept up, that they have not figured out how to stop that erosion. And he thinks that he's the person to do that. He certainly had a lot of thoughtful ideas and talked about his background in business and in banking, and has specific ways that he wants to take that background in business and banking and apply it to state fiscal issues.
Are we seeing
this race will partially just be a test of to what extent do voters really know their local assembly members, and to what extent do they remember congressional candidates from 3 years ago? I think that's like just when so much of this is about, sort of the familiar name, the name you trust in the ballot. I honestly don't know in this case which category of politician voters are going to remember and trust more. And I wouldn't necessarily say that a result in one direction or the other will prove definitive in any particular direction, because every campaign has its own quirks and things. But I do find this to be an interesting test case for that particular idea. And you see it elsewhere too. We were talking before, Jerry Walker ran for Congress, Ravi Bala ran for Congress. These are people who now get to use, mediocre amounts of money in congressional campaigns are huge amounts of money in state legislative campaigns. And so they were putting themselves out there to degrees that assembly candidates now just can't keep up with. The question is whether voters retain that loyalty and whether they view these races in kind of the same light, or whether they think, well, that was a completely different scenario. Ravi Bala was running against Rob Menendez. I voted against Menendez more than I voted for Bala, or, whatever the logic is.
And to that point, Azariti is in his first term, so he hasn't had a lot of time to build his name recognition outside of Saddle River Borough, where he's been on council before this. But, typically in New Jersey, what we see with legislative races over the years is if you're going to get them, you're going to get them in that first term. You're going to get them that first reelect. And so we'll see if he can defy that or not.
It's also
it's interesting, too, because Azariti's not been the one who's been targeted. Is the wisdom that Off is the one that's been targeted? So is Azariti more safe? I guess we'll see. I guess we'll move on from there. I'll appease our listeners and go to the 40th for the second.
There's nothing to say about the 40th.
There's nothing to say.
On both sides. Okay, are you happy, Al Barlas?
Unless there's a sudden write-in campaign. I'll see you in November, Al Barlas.
I've got some things to say, but I'm going to wait till the end.
I like New Jersey's laws on uncontested races and write-in laws, because in most states, uncontested races don't have a primary race. They go right to the GE ballot. And in most states, there's write-in filing requirements, but New Jersey doesn't have any of that. So it's the wild, wild west with write-in campaigns here in Jersey. So
you don't even AP doesn't report numbers for uncontested races. You just skip over them.
Yeah,
right?
we don't cover them. No,
Yeah.
My
we don't
very
have
first
any
chance to vote in person, in fact, did not exist because all of my local races in New York in 2018 were in that primary were uncontested.
Yeah, you don't have a primary.
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can't say that this year. Let's go a little bit south, switch parties again over to the Democrats. I want to talk about the 28th, another of the premier primaries in the state. We've got two assemblywomen seeking re-election. One, Cleopatra Tucker, 81-year-old incumbent. She's allied with Res Baraka, received the party endorsement. Her running mate, not running mate this year, but her assembly mate, Garnett Hall, it sort of looked like she would drop out for a second, but she ended up actually running alongside Fulop on Steve Fulop's Democrats for Change slate. But there's a third candidate here, third Democrat, who's kind of risen as a star in the Newark area, and this is a Essex County, Union County district that includes parts of Newark. But Chigozie Onyeama, he's the co-chair of New York's West Ward Democratic Committee. He ran for city council a couple years ago. I think they lost. He's kind of arisen as a star. He won the Essex County endorsement. He beat Garnett Hall and Cleopatra Tucker for that first spot. He's received big endorsements, whether it's from Working Families Party, otherwise. But if there's a sudden rising star to really point out, and so far that we've seen, I think Chigozie Onyeama is one of them.
I would say kind of really quickly,
not 81 now.
What did you say, Joey?
Cleopatra Tucker is now 82.
Happy birthday. Late birthday. I missed it, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, David, you are banned from talking about this district. This will be a discussion.
I'm not banned. I'm not banned, especially in fact checking. I'll say that Cleopatra Tucker, and I mean, I knew her late husband from when I was a kid. This probably would have been. She probably had, if this was the old days of the line, and if not for Ras Baraka running for governor, I think she'd be gone. I think she probably would have retired, but she's firmly in the Baraka camp, and they wanted her in that race, and I won't, I don't know why, Joey, that you attacked me on this one, but the reality here is Garnett Hall's issue is she was tapped on the shoulder and said, "Congratulations, you have been just appointed to the state assembly." She wasn't even campaigning for it. Mila Jacey unexpectedly retired, and they said, "Okay, we're going to give it to Maplewood, and we're going to give it to Garnett Hall." She we can debate later whether she squandered opportunities or not, but she didn't raise money and she didn't forge relationships with county committee, and she lost that convention and she lost party support. And the facts are that she was in the race and then she was out of the race. She announced she wasn't running, and then she wasn't sure what she was going to do, and then she was definitely out, and then she's now running with Steve Fulop, and she not long before she wound up on the Fulop ticket, she wrote a check to Mikey Sherrill's campaign, to help her, get to the full match. So, there's just a lot of moving pieces there. Onyeama seems to be the guy that everybody likes, and we'll see where this goes. If there are incumbents who lose, whether it's incumbent on incumbent in Newark or incumbent on incumbent in the 31st, that might be the reason. But this is to me, and hopefully I'll get the approval of Joey when I say this, but to me, this is exactly what wouldn't have happened had the lines remained in existence. If there was still a line, they would have either supported the incumbents, or they would have given Baraka a pick for the Tucker Assembly seat, and he would have put somebody else in there, and Garnett Hall could have been looking at a multi-term political career. Even though she's sort of, now running with Fulop and running on the change ticket and coming out of the super progressive, Maplewood group, who, by the way, didn't want her 2 years ago and were angry that she got, that they were, she was forced upon them. But this is an example of somebody whose allies are all benefiting from there being no line except for her. She wouldn't have had any trouble at all if there was still a line.
We would be talking about a Republican primary in this district, but maybe we wouldn't be talking about it, but there would be a Republican primary in this district. But this is one of the funny notes too, I think, of this cycle, which is there were 3 Republican candidates who filed, and all 3 knocked each other off the ballot with petition challenges. So now there are no Republicans running in this district, but that's how it goes.
This is one thing that I always like to track in elections, is how many seats end up uncontested. Because New Jersey is really good compared to a lot of other states around the country about actually having very few seats uncontested. And I think that is partially attributable to strong local parties. And this year, one person who gets a fair bit of credit is Steve Fulop, who put up some candidates in hard districts when the local parties couldn't sort of find a second. So if I remember correctly, I think there are Democrats in all 80 theoretically, Democrats could hold 80 assembly seats. At the end.
I have that data. I can pull a report in our system, tabulation system. You want a number of uncontested races?
I think that there are something like 6 or 7 Republican gaps, 5 or 6, based in part on signature challenges.
We don't have data on that. I thought you were asking how many uncontested races there were, because I have the data. We have that in our system.
Yeah. But I'm not just curious about primaries. I'm curious about sort of how many potential uncontested general elections there are. But so one thing that we always sort of have to track is in New Jersey, you can have an alternate path to the ballot where you get a sufficient number of write-in votes that matches the number of signatures you would have needed to get onto the primary ballot. So,
which of course is now higher.
Right, it is now higher. So now it's 250 instead of 100.
Yep.
But still, 250 write-in votes for a lot of these county organizations and legislative districts of more than 200,000 people theoretically shouldn't be an enormous lift. But we'll see how many they're able to pull across the finish line and how many fully contested races we end up having in November.
Yeah, and by the way, as Republicans in the 28th district, are out there campaigning, trying to get write-in, 250 write-in votes, not so easy. They're working for what? For the chance to be annihilated in November in one of the most Democratic districts in the state. So this, again, John Lynch, here's nothing, guard it with your life. And what a campaign this is, watching these people out there, sending out postcards. It's adorable that they're sending out postcards to registered Republicans in the 28th, reminding them to vote for assembly candidates that they've never heard of, that they're not at all invested in. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Can't help but admire it.
I don't think Essex County reports total write-in votes on election day on their website either, just FYI. So we're not even going to know how many write-in votes there are.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Seriously, you guys tell me when we come back and do this in October, and I'll be fine with that. I don't need to know till October if there's Republican candidates in the 28th.
I won't be sleepy there, yeah.
Do we even need to know then?
No, we don't. We don't.
I've got to add my obligatory note. Candidates in impossible races are the unsung heroes of democracy.
Absolutely.
There may only be like, I don't know, 3,000 total Republicans in the entire 28th legislative district, but God damn it, they deserve someone who they want to vote for.
Yeah. And by the way, and this, I agree with you completely. And I know that I joke about these unwinnable races, especially when candidates don't know that it's unwinnable. But yeah, they are the sacrificial lambs are these sacrificial lambs are the superheroes of a political party. But I'll tell you one other thing, and I think this is, this goes in line with, up and down the state, whether it's Democrats running in Republican districts or vice versa, is you're going to have a competitive gubernatorial race, and with with the ability to forge relationships with the candidates, and if these Republican write-ins in the 28th win, and they're out there and they do a little bit and they bring a handful of votes to the Republican nominee for governor just by working for him, there are things for them. There are, motor vehicle agencies and board appointments and, all sorts of little trinkets and rewards, jobs in state government that could go to these people who are the sacrificial lambs. So it's, not going to make an impact on who wins or loses, but there's a lot for somebody to gain by working hard in an unwinnable race if they play their relationship with the gubernatorial candidate's campaign properly.
Peg Schaefer taught us all last year that county organizations can give rewarding jobs in state government and the judiciary.
Yeah.
That was, I'm glad that we all learned that from her.
I can't do it. I don't know if any of you can, if somebody could take the Democratic ballot for Somerset County for the office of governor and office block voting and put it up on the screen.
Yeah. I don't know if I have that.
But
I clearly can't be trusted with technology, so I don't even want to try.
It's the one where 5 of the 6 candidates are running under the county banner, county organization slogan,
and then Fulop.
Yeah.
I sort of wonder if that that helps Fulop to be the one different slogan than everybody else. And his slogan is Democrats for Change, and all the others are the same. I don't know. It's an interesting gambit.
That could catch some voters' eyes, I would think.
Yeah.
And I've kind of wondered that a little bit too, because some of the candidates have pursued the classic New Jersey strategy of I think Josh Gottheimer in Hudson County, for example, is Democrats of Hudson County, and he's in the first slot. And I saw a sign of his on Twitter that was Democrats of Hudson County 1A endorse Josh Gottheimer. It's yep.
Yeah.
All of that
There's signs. There's signs right at the end of my street that has that sign, Joey. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I wanted to send you guys a picture. It was
but so I wonder whether voters will sort of, without the line, I wonder whether voters will kind of be attracted to that at all, or be a little bit hoodwinked by it in terms of who the county party is actually supporting, or whether, I think Raz Barak and Steve Fulop are the two that have just this very consistent slogan across the state. Fulop is always Democrats for Change, and Barak is always Reimagine NJ. And whether voters will be more attracted, or voters just won't care because, what exactly are ballot slogans doing when people know these candidates are already going into the ballot box. But to whatever extent it matters, the sort of classic tricky, ooh, I have not the official Essex County Democratic slogan, but I have something that sure sounds like it, or whether they'll more gravitate towards just sort of direct, this is what my campaign is.
All right, I'm going to keep it moving. I shouldn't have ever left Bergen County in the first place. I want to go back to the 37th legislative district. That's another triple slate race, including a couple of county party-backed candidates, 2 incumbents, Shawna Hader and Ellen Park. They're both incumbents, I believe. Are they both freshmen? I forget off the top of my head, but I believe they might be.
They're sophomores.
Sophomores. I apologize to them. But challenging them, you've got, once again, 2 Fulop-backed candidates, Democrats for Change. One of them, Daniel Park, a councilman up there. Another of them is Tamar Warburg. She is an attorney, or no, she's a Jewish community Jewish community leader from Teaneck. I believe she used to be attorney or does work as an attorney as well. And then there's a third slate too. There's sort of a wild card. Former Teaneck councilman Yitz Stern, and then a small business owner, Rosemary Hernandez Carroll. I don't have a clear idea exactly of the strength of that third slate or what the status of this race is, frankly, just partly because there's so many cross-cutting dynamics between Jewish communities in that district as well as Korean communities in that district. The two parks running against each other, for example, they're not related, but still notable. But I also am not sure exactly the strength because they seem to be running a competent campaign. It's everything I've seen out of them is professional, and I don't have any reason to believe that they are doing poorly or utterly failing at what they're trying to do. But when we look at Bergen County, I think it's going to be a race to look out for.
You covered it so completely that we're lost for words.
So then I'll go right over to 35 then, which is another Bergen County. It also has Passaic in it. This one has been having a little bit of a sliding doors moment because when Bill Pascrell, the late representative in the House, died, Nellie Poe, the state senator, took his spot. And so this is, if you really want to know the importance of showing up and just sticking there and sticking through a vote, when Democratic council members met to select their new state senator to replace Nellie Poe, the two candidates, Benji Wimberly, assemblyman, and his fellow assemblymate, sorry, can someone remind me of the name? I'm so sorry, I'm blanking. Siobhan DeSumter, that's right. I'm sorry, I blanked there for a second. But Benji Wimberly and Siobhan DeSumter were both running for that state Senate seat. They tied on the first ballot, 70-70, I believe. So, they had to order pizza. It was a long night in that gymnasium at that Patterson school. And so then the second round came through. 3 people left, and 1 Benji Wimberly supporter left, and 2 Siobhan DeSumter supporters left. And so just like that, just that little bit of luck and odds, and Benji Wimberly became state senator, and Siobhan DeSumter decided she didn't want to be in politics anymore. So we've got essentially 2 open assembly seats, not really, because they picked Al Abdelaziz to replace Benji Wimberly in the assembly that night. And so he's technically an incumbent, but it's really only for a few months. Although I do get the sense that he is decently well liked and has a solid chance at winning re-election there. Along with Abdelaziz is running with Orlando Cruz, Passaic County Commissioner. They're both county backed. There are 2 other candidates, Democrats, in this race. They're not running together. They're actually Rami Herrera. He is running with Phillips, Democrats for Change slate. And then Kenyatta Stewart. He is a lawyer, an attorney for the Newark Corporation Council. He's an ally of Mayor Baraka in Newark. They're both challenging, and I've actually not heard much about this race, and so that's my fault, and I should check up on it. But it's interesting.
And the Somerset ballot that everyone was shown in the middle of that was not, in fact, specifically related to that race, but was illustrative of about 20 minutes ago.
I did not realize it was even shown. I was looking at my notes.
I'll put it back up after this district, but just to show that, this is the 2 oldest guys on this live stream. Micah was able to find the ballot and email it to me, and I was able to figure out how to put it up, even though I jumped the gun on it. But look,
we're really proud.
I know you marvel at my technology skills, Joey, but look, 35, again, this is a test of the Passaic County organization, and they were tested last year, and people thought even with the line their sheriff candidate could be in trouble, and without the line they won in a landslide. So I don't know what's going to go on there. I can tell you that Abdelaziz is clearly a rising star there. And the county commissioner has a little bit of a base, and they're both been taken under the wing by Benji Wimberly, who's got pretty strong approval among rank and file real voters over the years. So we'll see. I mean, I think what Stewart is counting on is a heavy we talk about this district being where we look at the diversity of this district. This is a Hispanic majority district, and the question is Raz Baraka going to be able to pull out enough black voters in Patterson in order to sort of tilt those votes toward Stewart. But this is a good race to watch. But I think you're going to see more and more of Abdelaziz and a growing Arab American community that is has now basically with his election in that special kicked the door in. And have now created a presence in the legislature, and I think you're going to see the growing political power of that community come forward in this primary.
For whatever it's worth, this is also the only district in the state with a state Senate race on the ballot, because Benji Wimberly has to run for a special election.
Right.
And I don't know
primary
that much. It's not like he has any primary opponents, and he's going to win the general probably very easily. The one thing that I would say is that it means that, one thing about assembly race, that the assembly race only cycle, when that comes around in New Jersey, is that it means people that are oftentimes accustomed to running with their sort of more well-known, more popular, more, skilled campaigner of a running mate at the top of their ticket, they can kind of benefit from that going down ballot. Like these tickets are oftentimes called like the blank team based on the state senator. And when the state senator is off the ballot, then suddenly these assembly members are the ones in the spotlight, and they struggle with that a little bit. So I don't know whether this matters at all, but it is at least noticeable that, Benji Wimberly is in fact campaigning right now. He is in fact on the ballot with his running mates. That's part of the dynamic here.
We're not.
Yeah, and I remember. Yeah, we look at those old days down in Micah's home base of Cumberland County. Even when Jeff Van Drew wasn't on the ballot, those assembly candidates ran as the Van Drew team.
Right.
Van Drew team.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Democratic assembly candidates, by the way. So
I would say from a vote tab perspective, Passaic reports pretty late, so we won't give results immediately after 8 o'clock there. Just so hang tight.
It's always our enemy on this particular issue.
Yeah. That night in that gymnasium, that was a Hard Knocks entrance into special elections reporting. Yeah.
I think the Sherrill campaign is going to be putting a little bit more pressure on John Curry and the Passaic County Board of Elections to get some numbers out early. And I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work, but I sort of envision, it's 11:30 at night. There's no numbers out of Passaic, and John Curry's worst case scenario is the Sherrill campaign says to Siley Avalenda, go up there and get the numbers, and then John Curry will have met his match.
Well, then we'll send our stringer there with him.
Hey, Brian, as long as we're on this, because before we wrap up, tell me from you've been following this now closely, a bunch of primary and generals.
Yeah.
What are the counties that we should be watching, as a result of slow numbers?
Passaic is one of them
For sure.
Sussex, half of Burlington. I feel like those pictures on the Pine Barrens come very late.
Burlington is also known for throwing on some extra votes at the end that change the result.
Yeah,
that's happened a couple times.
Yeah.
Bergen used to be pretty late, but they've gotten better, at least in last year. A lot of counties have really improved because of the change in laws with the vote by mail count, and with in-person early voting and being more popular too, we get more vote right away. But yeah, Passaic, Sussex, and Burlington are usually like the last three we're waiting for an election night, in my experience.
Yeah. I feel like I remember Morris sometimes having some.
They report quick, but yeah, they take a while to update, but they report their advanced votes like right away though.
Okay.
Yeah.
And look, we've got, you've got, and I think Cumberland also in that sense. And, I look at something like Warren and Sussex, they report late, but they report on time, which means they don't release in piecemeal. But about 11 o'clock at night, you'll get the report up online, and it'll be complete. So it's just a place where you sort of have to be patient. But Jeff Parrott, Holly Mackey of Rider University, I should add.
Right. Yeah, my class of 1992. That's right.
Yeah, well educated. And by the way, for those looking for things to do on election day, and they're not actually out there working, for their candidates. Don't miss the Warren County Clerk's website on election day, because sometimes they can be very funny in the way they handle it. It's it's always good to look at. But and then you have to watch, Ryan, some counties where you have to do your own math, right? I mean, they'll put up numbers, but they're only you have to go to a couple different places and then add, in-person election day to early votes to vote by mail.
Not anymore, Dave. I think all counties have one universal system now. I think 2023 was the last year where like Morris and Atlantic, you had to add separate PDFs to their graphics website. That was not the case in the 23 general. It wasn't the primary. I think since the 23 general, no counties have been like that, thank God. But yes, I remember
Bergen can get a little funky.
Well, right, except for the time when Bergen was like, we're gonna accidentally forget all of them. Tee.
Yeah.
That definitely happened.
That was in 24. Yeah, that was
23. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was not a good moment for Joe Lagana, who won in comfortably, was all of a sudden looking and saying, am I the new Steve Sweeney of this cycle?
Right. We were looking at like all of the results were like, oh yeah, Democrats are winning the toss-up races by 10 points, and they're winning like the lean R races by 1 point. And then you look at Bergen County, it's like, is Joe Lagana gonna lose? Yeah. Then no, it's just a spreadsheet.
No, right. He won impressively, and the only people that were really concerned about it was Joe Lagana and Paul Giuliano, because they didn't have the right numbers. We've got a lot of other districts in the state that we're not going to walk through tonight. Are there any that anybody think we need to discuss that we haven't? Besides the perspective.
I mean, I'll be interested in how a ton of these assembly races go, especially like the full-up challenges in South Jersey. I'm curious to see whether any of them sort of take off at all. I'm curious about the few districts. I think it's LDs 1, 9, and 10, where there are 2 full-up candidates and 1 party candidate. I think that's kind of an unusual dynamic. And I'll be interested to see how that kind of plays out. Interested a little bit in LD 17, where Kevin Egan and especially Joe Danielson had sort of taken some fire. Joe Danielson was the Oprah overhaul sponsor, and that sort of seemed like, leading into this year, it seemed like if anybody was going to be the guy who really kind of took a hit from the lack of lines, it would be him. And then the assembly candidate there, Loretta Rivers, the Phillip assembly candidate, hasn't sort of obviously made her campaign into a thing, but these things can surprise us. I'll sort of be interested to see whether that has any kind of reverberations in that race. I mean, this is the kind of primary night where I think that we can make reasonable guesses about how 19 out of 20 races are going to go, but we also have to be a little bit on our toes. we're going to have to genuinely, as Zach and David and I work on the Globe website on election night to sort of upload results and put out stories and make sure that people know what the outcomes are. We're not going to be able to do it on autopilot, because I think that we're going to have to be looking at each of these races individually and see, we might discover dynamics that we just hadn't noticed in the lead up to the campaign. Maybe it turns out that there was one of the Phillip Assembly running mates who just was extremely strong and we never really picked up on it for X or Y reason. Or that some primary that, we can barely even rattle off the names off the top of our head right here, right now, actually turns out to be quite competitive. So I would just advise everybody, the focus, especially on a national level, is going to be entirely on the two governors' primaries. So, the New York Times headline the next day is not going to talk about LD 12, but that doesn't even matter, primary, LD 13. But for us hyperlocal people, this is definitely a more interesting year than usual, and we need to be prepared for things to be unexpected, because that's the only thing that's expected in politics, is that sometimes unexpected things happen.
In building on that a little bit, Joey, I think these sets of races could be especially interesting within a national conversation too, specifically as we hear people talking, chatter more and more about a potential Democratic Tea Party, as Democratic voters are angry with their base. They're angry with their members of Congress and their county leaders and et cetera, maybe not necessarily county leaders, but it's part of a broader narrative. And so far there hasn't been a large electoral test of Democratic incumbents in the country since the election of Donald Trump. And we've seen little hints of anger here and there in municipal elections, both in New Jersey and some smaller elections across the country. But this is really the first statewide mass election where we're going to have 40 primaries to see. And if there are early hints to Democratic Tea Party over the next few years, the hints might be here.
I would also say, I want to also point out that I have a data scientist colleague who analyzed the 2023 primary when both the Senate and the Assembly were up. He analyzed the total Senate vote for like a certain district and county and multiplied that by 2 for the Assembly. And there was roughly a 10% drop off with the Senate race and the Assembly race. So there's about 10% of voters only vote for one candidate for Assembly, and that could obviously affect the outcome of a certain race.
I'll bet that there is still a non-zero proportion of New Jersey voters who, if you told them that they currently have 2 Assembly members and not just 1, they'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
If you read your ballot, vote for 2, you could
Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't in any sense of, even remotely possible reality, in the future, but
Right.
it's you sort of wonder what would happen. We spend a lot of time in New Jersey talking about ballot position, and I sometimes wonder what our elections would look like if you didn't print any names on the ballot at all, and voters had to go in, write down the names of who they want for each office. And if they don't know who they were voting for, then they don't, who they want, then they don't get to vote. And I think the result would be you'd have vacancies up and down the state for county commissioner. Because nobody, people just don't know them. So we're looking at the first true office block ballot. This is the ballot that Karashi built, and it is changing the face of everything.
Don't tell him that. Don't tell him, right? He says that his edict has not been followed, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because there was chatter about a legal challenge, but it never came.
Right, and this was this footnote in his decision yesterday that sort of dropped a very not at all subtle hint that he might not be satisfied, but whether he's satisfied or not, he'll get to make this a work in progress if he feels like it. But I think this is still his ballot. One of the things that I'm gonna and we don't know. We don't know if this race is going to be easily won on the Democratic side by somebody, or whether it's going to be razor thin, whether we have a winner on election night or not. But one thing that that Ryan will be on top of, but you have to sort of wonder about some of the county clerks and the Board of Elections is, imagine if we get into Wednesday and we don't have a nominee, and now all of a sudden that's a national story. How New Jersey counts its votes is a national story, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that county clerks in New Jersey are terrific. Democrats and Republicans. I think 18 counties are extraordinarily fortunate to have these county clerks. So it's important to remind everybody that county clerks don't actually count the votes. They report the votes, but they don't count them. And if there are delays in these counties, it's not the clerk's fault. It's the bipartisan Board of Elections. And nobody should think going into this primary that delayed reactions on delayed reporting of some of these numbers represents anything that resembles chicanery. It's just you've got New Jersey's a place where if you've seen one county, you've seen one county. They all have their own ways of doing things, and it's going to be really the bad news for some of the national media is if they suddenly get on this story of a tight Democratic primary and they won't know what to do. The good news is NBC has Steve Kornacki, and he understands it just fine. And he'll say, well, Port Reading, part of Woodbridge is missing, and be able to make certain assumptions that'll be correct. Before we wrap up, I just want to go back to the Republican primary. We haven't talked about it a lot. Clearly Chitterelli is the front runner, but at this point in a game, everybody runs like they're 10 points down, and you never really know what's going to happen. What's everybody looking for on primary night on the Republican side?
I'm curious if how he does in Ocean and Camden County, since he got the endorsement there. But given that I'm from Ocean County, all the Republicans I know there, they're not voting for him. So I'm just curious to see if he makes a dent in the margins in those counties.
You mean Spadia in this case?
Yeah. But they're voting, the Republicans I know are in Ocean County are voting for Chitterelli. So If Chitterelli, when we're back a week from tonight to talk about the results, if Chitterelli wins Ocean County, we're going to have a whole added thing to talk about. Maybe we should invite Shlomo on too, because all of a sudden the future of Ocean will be changing. What do you guys think? John Bramnick, did he get the race that he wanted? He always knew, always from the beginning, knew that he had an uphill fight. He never, in the couple of years that he and I talked about his plans to run for governor, he was always fairly realistic. But with a Trump endorsement, and with Trump's numbers really good among New Jersey Republicans, did Bramnick get the race that he by the way, Shlomo says he's in, so we're good. But
no, there were two problems for Bramnick. Yeah. The first problem was Trump winning, right? It would be his arguments, his principled arguments against Trump would have been completely different had Trump just lost the presidential election. I think that was the first biggest problem for Bramnick. The second biggest problem for Bramnick is that Trump's numbers haven't cratered, especially among New Jersey Republicans. And so there's not a lot of, you don't see a lot of room for daylight around those two things. The other thing that he didn't get is that Jack has outraised his opponents. The other thing he got was that Jack has the benefit of of Trump's endorsement, and he's got the benefit of the county organizations that are supporting him. So between the strength that Ciattarelli has amassed organizationally and endorsement-wise and money-wise, and how things didn't come together for Bramnick with regard to Trump, it's a real uphill climb what you might be looking for him on election night.
I think that both Bramnick and Spadia, to some extent, kind of had to rely on a Ciattarelli collapse. And there were definitely moments where it looked like that might be happening. Like there was sort of the Ciattarelli personal life stuff that really kind of put him in a bad place for a little while. And there was, when Trump was kind of railing on him, there was definitely a period where it looked like Ciattarelli was super on the ropes. But I mean, at the end of the day, he had more connections statewide than anyone else running, because of course he did, because he was just the nominee. And he, I think I don't know if there was a poll that existed as like early as a year ago or 2 years ago, but I'm sure if you just polled sort of generally Republican voters, the ones who remember Jack Ciattarelli would say, oh yeah, Jack Ciattarelli. So that kind of gave him these sort of like baseline advantages. And in order for anyone else to kind of leapfrog over him, they would have needed something specific to go wrong for him. They would have needed Trump to go further than just critiquing him a little bit and actually like make an endorsement of someone else. They'd have needed county parties to actively say, like, we actually don't really want to go down the same Jack road again. We're kind of looking for something else. It just like, even a Republican who ran a perfect campaign against Jack Ciattarelli this year, I'm not sure if they would have won, because I think that Ciattarelli started out from a winning position and needed to not fumble it. And there were times when it looked like he might, but he really didn't. He ended up playing his hand really well. And I don't know if there was room necessarily for anyone else to overtake that.
Also, he announced that he was going to run again like 20 minutes after AP called the race in 2021. So
right.
He was like, nobody come near me for the next 4 years. So there's that.
I'll be interested in the county map when it's said and done, because the Democratic race, there's a solid chance 5 different candidates could win a county. In the Republican race, there's a solid chance one. There's a solid chance that Ciattarelli might just sweep. And I know that Spadia has Ocean County advantages and things like that, but it's so much simpler in its way, with fewer geographical cross-cutting advantages here, fewer ideological weirdnesses and stuff like that. But I don't know.
Yeah. It was interesting 4 years ago. Ciattarelli was the first Republican, non-incumbent Republican gubernatorial candidate in New Jersey history to sweep all 21 counties. And I'm not predicting anything on this race, because like I said, you just never know. But Ocean. What Ocean may be is sort of the gateway as to whether Ciattarelli can do that a second time. And that, you want to talk about a record that might be hard to break down the road. It's sweeping 21 counties as a non-incumbent twice. That's, if that happens, that would be, that'd be something to be very proud of. And look, this election, regardless of who wins on either side, this is still just the primary, and this is going to be a barn burner of a general, and I don't know. There's a lot of outside factors that we'll be able to talk about in the future, but this is going to be a great race, and none of them. I mean, again, you go back to Mikey Sherrill, and we joked a little bit earlier in this about, is she did she fly a helicopter? Is she a mom? Was she a prosecutor? Because we've heard this life story so often, but if it's Mikey Sherrill, we should make no mistake. This, she would be one tough, out for Republicans. And the reason that a lot of Democratic organization people decided to go for her in the beginning is a belief that she is just electable, that she's a good candidate, that, and by the way, she's all of these candidates, they get better as they get experience over the course of the campaign. We saw this with Andy Kim against Tom MacArthur in 2018. If you remember, late 2017, early 2018, Andy Kim, it really was not on the top of the list for of Democrats thinking they could really flip that, other than Andy and his core team. But here's a guy who just progressively got better as a candidate. And, Mikey, went through that in 18 and has that district, the first couple of times she ran, that was not an easy district. That was not a slam dunk, even in a good national climate. So with the joking and the teasing that we might have done at the beginning, all of us, men in a room that we're sort of making these jokes, but she is one fierce competitor, and don't let the outer surface of the niceness fool you about her ability to play on a statewide level and be really good. And I'll say the same thing, and by the way, Gottheimer too, and Fulop and Baraka, and you say the same thing whether it's Spady or Chitterelli, and we saw this at the debate where all three Republicans had a really solid performance. But what you saw with Chitterelli is, first of all, a focus and a command of he wasn't giving Democrats many sound bites to use in that. He was as disciplined a candidate as I've ever seen, and this guy is hungry, and he is good at it, and
he's had 8 years to polish those messages and those arguments against a Democratic third term. And you're right. Nobody should be disrespectful of a very compelling biography and qualifications. No question about that, hands down. But at the same time, you talk about a learning curve. The learning curve is about to get very steep after this primary, and somebody's going to have to start taking it immediately to a very polished opponent.
Yeah, and go ahead. I'm sorry.
One of the interesting things I think is about Cheryl's bio is that it almost never includes member of Congress. And I'm not accusing her of trying to hide that she's a member of Congress. I don't even think it's necessarily her fault, because it's just the simple fact that members of Congress aren't popular right now, even if they are elected safely. But that's just another little wrinkle. It's just how all of those dynamics are coming in for her. And I think it's smart at the end of the day. Yeah.
And she is, she too is hungry for this. And, I think back to, the early days of the Cheryl political career, and she is not afraid to punch somebody in the face, and Jack Chitterelli is not afraid to punch somebody in the face, and I think we're gonna, if it's that combination, and I don't know that it will be, but if it's that combination, we're gonna see a real Jersey style general election there. And it's going to be something to watch, and because it might be the only competitive gubernatorial election in the country out of two, I think you're going to see a national eyes on Jersey going forward. We can talk about that next week. Is there anything anybody else wants to say before we end this? And I should just do, I'm going to do a quick shout out to Michael Matthews, who I've never spoken to and I've never met, but it is obvious that he watches every single thing we do. Reads every story, watches every inside edge and every debate and every one of these forums we do. And I just want to use him as a metaphor. New Jersey's got a lot of people that they love watching the game, and that's to the New Jersey Globe especially, that's just the core of who we like to speak to. So thank you, Michael Matthews. Okay.
I'm fine with ending on that note.
I think that's a good place to end off. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cheers, yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. We will be back Thursday night with hopefully more information than we have tonight.
Go Tigers.
Thanks, everybody.